You wake up to the dull creak of timber above your head. It's not your ceiling fan making noise. It's a thatched roof, shifting slightly in the dawn wind, the straw rustling like dry paper. You're lying on a narrow straw mattress stuffed with hay, itchy wool pressing against your neck, and the smell of damp earth climbing up from the clay floor. Welcome to a perfectly average Tuesday in a medieval knight's manor. You probably won't make it through this day. The air is chilly, not refreshing like mountain air, more like the inside of a root cellar. You shift and your bones complain. It's hard to be heroic on an empty stomach, and you're definitely going to be heroic today. Just very slowly. Outside, a rooster crows, a little too proud of himself. You hear the kitchen servant clanging about with pots in the manor's lean-to kitchen. She's making pottage again. You know, because that's what she makes every morning. And no one has invented breakfast cereal yet. Not even the sweet kind with weird mascots. Just warm, brown, overcooked mush. Again, before you eat, you pull on your tunic. A little stained, a little scratchy. Probably made of coarse wool and dyed with something cheerful, like onion skins. You reach for your belt. It's not your fancy one. That's for justs and royal visits. This one is just good enough to keep your britches up. There's a knock. It's your squire. He's 16, smells like smoke and sweat, and is alarmingly enthusiastic. He's holding your boots and sword, even though you're not going anywhere interesting. Today's agenda? Checking fence posts, overseeing grain storage, and maybe, settling a dispute between two neighbors over a pig. Glamorous, right? Outside the manor, the village is waking up in its own wheezy way. A thatcher patches a roof with long stalks of straw. A boy chases a runaway goose. You nod at the reeve, the manor's manager, who's already muttering about the barley harvest. You vaguely agree with him, even though you haven't seen a barley field in 3 weeks. The truth is, you haven't seen a battlefield in 3 years. Despite what the minstrels sing, being a knight isn't a non-stop sword fight. It's more like rural project management with the occasional murder license. When not off crusading, which, let's be honest, most of you weren't. You mostly stayed home and made sure the villagers didn't steal from the Lord's forest or marry without permission. Romantic stuff. Oh, and your sword? Probably blunt. Most knights didn't even carry them day to day. You mostly wear a small eating knife and hope you don't need more than that. Historians still debate whether the average knight would have been a decent fighter outside of tournaments. But hey, you look good on a horse. Speaking of horses, yours is chewing hay and eyeing you like you owe him something. His name is either Thunderhoof or Stephen, depending on whether you're trying to impress anyone. You spend a morning watching your bailiff argue with a miller about grain weight. Technically, you're supposed to mediate, but you mostly nod a lot and occasionally grunt. After that, your squire helps you inspect the chicken coop. You pretend to care. One of the hens is missing half her feathers. You make a mental note to ignore it. Fun fact, knights didn't always live in castles. Many had modest manors, like this one, with drafty walls and no indoor plumbing. Chamber pots and cold water were your reality. Oh, and fleas. Lots of fleas. Lunch arrives just as you consider lying about stomach cramps to avoid the afternoon inspection. It's bread, more pottage, and a slice of hard cheese that could probably deflect arrows. You chew slowly. The fire crackles. Outside, a dog chases a pig into a turnip patch. You briefly envy the pig. You settle into your wooden chair and stare at a tapestry depicting St. George slaying a dragon. The dragon looks suspiciously like a large goose. You're not impressed. Now let's ease into tonight's journey slowly, like a cart with a cracked axle rolling downhill. The afternoon sun slants through the open window like it's bored of shining on the same old dirt road. You've finished lunch, and now it's time for the part of the day medieval knights truly excelled at, waiting. You lean against the cold stone wall and try not to fall asleep while your squire polishes your helmet. He keeps asking whether to buff it with oil or sand. You tell him whichever makes it shinier. He doesn't understand sarcasm yet. Today's excitement comes in the form of a minor land dispute. A peasant named Alf claims his neighbor's sheep wandered into his field and trampled his turnips. You ride out very slowly on Stephen the horse, who is still upset about not being fed apples this morning. You arrive at the scene. Two peasants are shouting. The sheep, of course, look entirely uninterested. You dismount and approach with your best neutral but vaguely noble expression. After hearing both sides for 15 minutes, you declare, "The sheep shall be shared." No one likes it, but they nod. Fun historical fact. Many knights acted as local judges for small disputes like this. They were expected to uphold the law. But let's be honest, it was more vibes than jurisprudence. You mostly wanted to keep things calm and tax-paying. You continue your rounds. Remember that muddy street from earlier? You pass it again. It still smells like boiled cabbage and horse sweat. You nod to the same goose boy. He nods back. It's a weird friendship now. You stop by the manor barn to check on the plow. It's broken again. You pretend to have a solution, but the truth is you have no idea how plows work. You offer a vaguely encouraging grunt and leave. Mid-afternoon brings a rare event. A traveling tinker has arrived, selling pots, needles, and a mysterious tooth powder that smells like ash and mint. Your squire begs for a copper to buy a small mirror. You give it to him. Later, he'll stare into it for hours, imagining himself as a knight. You don't have the heart to tell him that's mostly paperwork and sore knees. Oh, and here's an odd little cultural nugget. Some knights believe that carrying a dried mole's foot in their pocket would protect them from cramps. You don't have one. You do, however, have a very stiff lower back. You return to the manor just as the bell tolls for vespers. The priest drones through the Latin prayers. You mumble along, not because you understand them, but because it's safer to look devout. The candles flicker. A rat scurries along the stone ledge. You pretend not to see it. Historians still debate whether most knights were actually literate. You can read a little, enough to squint at a royal order and not look like a fool. But mostly, if it isn't a feast invitation or a tax report, it goes unread. Evening begins to settle in. The sky turns dusty rose, and the manor hall fills with the soft sounds of tired villagers preparing to sleep. Someone is roasting onions. Your squire sings a very bad song about a fox. You're too tired to stop him. You eat a dinner that's remarkably similar to lunch, only with fewer expectations. The wine is sour. The bread is harder. The cheese is still cheese. As the fire burns low, you glance at the door, half hoping someone will burst in with a real emergency. Bandits, a lost noblewoman, a sudden duel. But no, just silence. Just another slow, ordinary day in the life of a knight not at war. You sigh and head upstairs to your straw bed. The night wind whistles through the shutters. Stephen snorts in his sleep outside. Your sword hangs on the wall, untouched. You lie back and stare at the dark beams above you. You wonder, briefly, if tomorrow will be any different. The morning doesn't arrive so much as seep in, like a draft under a crooked door. You wake again to the soft scratch of straw against your neck, the faint chirping of swallows nesting in the rafters, and your squire tripping over a chamber pot he forgot you placed by the bed last night. The pot spills, but it was mostly just cold air. You sigh with the weary dignity of someone used to disappointment. You stretch your arms. They ache, of course. Everything aches. Not from battle, but from existing in a time where pillows are filled with goose feathers and regret. You pull on your linen undershirt and tunic, both of which smell like a combination of smoke and ambition. Today, you've decided. You will finally go over the harvest records. Or pretend to. You're not sure which yet. Downstairs, the kitchen servant greets you with yesterday's pottage reheated with today's size. A single leak floats like a lonely swimmer. The bread is marginally softer this morning. Someone must have been feeling generous with the water barrel. You chew slowly, like someone trying to remember what joy tasted like. Your squire, now wide-eyed and flushed with embarrassment, brings you your ledger. This leather-bound tome contains the thrilling story of grain counts, wool shipments, and unpaid rents. You open it as one might open a grave. Dust puffs out dramatically. Your eyes scan the columns. It is, without question, the driest literature on earth. And yet, you're responsible for every number in here. Today's major historical truth? Knights didn't just swing swords, they managed estates, especially those who inherited land. Their duties included overseeing crops, collecting taxes, supervising justice. and attending feasts where half the guests fell asleep mid-toast. You close the book after reading exactly one entry. That feels like progress. Outside, the village is strangely quiet. A mist clings to the trees, the kind of weather that makes even the roosters pause before crowing. You take this as a sign from the heavens to walk the perimeter of your estate, a noble excuse to be alone and not hear any more arguments about goats. Your boots crunch softly on the dirt path. The fields stretch before you, golden with barley, humming with insects. You remember vaguely helping with harvest once. It was a disaster. You sickled the wrong way and hit your own foot. No one spoke of it again. You reach the edge of the woods. These trees, tall, stubborn oaks, are part of your lord's forest. The peasants aren't supposed to cut them or hunt here, but they do, of course. A rabbit trap lies hidden beneath leaves. You pretend not to see it. Justice is exhausting. And speaking of exhausting, your boots are too tight. You make a mental note to have the cobbler fix them. Then remember the cobbler left for the next town last week, and probably won't return for 2 more. You sigh with the drama of a Greek chorus, only softer. As you walk, you spot something curious. A small stone carving tucked into the moss near a stream. A round face with wide eyes and a strange grin. It's probably a household charm, placed here to ensure the stream flows sweet or the livestock stay healthy. Medieval people loved these little protective touches, symbols and rituals mixed with Christian devotion like herbs and soup. Not exactly theology, but close enough to keep things from going wrong. You touch the carving and wonder, briefly, if it's working. By the time you return to the manor, your squire has somehow gotten his hand stuck in a beehive box. You extract him with as much grace as possible, which is to say, very little. His finger is swollen. You mutter something about bravery and bees being messengers of God. It sounds wiser than it is. Inside, a visiting friar has arrived and is already speaking Latin at your steward. You recognize 2 words, deus and taxes. You nod solemnly, then slip away before you're recruited to donate a sheep or 3. Ah yes, another curious custom. Some knights would pay the church not only in tithes, but in indulgences, those heavenly IOUs that, theoretically, help shorten your time in purgatory. Historians still debate whether the average knight actually believed in them or just saw them as holy insurance policies. Either way, you donated a cow once and still aren't sure where it went. Lunch is served on a long, scarred table in the hall. More cheese, more pottage, more deeply nostalgic bread. You eat with one hand and flip through a parchment list of upcoming dues. Apparently, someone owes you 5 sacks of oats and a pig. You don't remember the deal, but it sounds like something you'd accept. Afterward, you sit by the window, watching mist roll back over the village. It's quiet, almost too quiet. Then you hear it, a distant commotion near the far field. You rise slowly, like a man preparing to meet destiny, but hoping it's just a misbehaving cow. It's not a cow. It's a puppet show. Yes, that's right. A troupe of traveling entertainers has arrived. They're setting up beside the barley barn, stringing up colorful cloth and whittling fresh puppets. Your steward sighs, clearly unimpressed, but you allow yourself a rare smirk. This might be the most thrilling thing that happens all month. So you sit on a hay bale with a few muddy-footed children and 2 yawning shepherds and watch as a wooden knight does battle with a very dramatic wooden dragon. The audience gasps at all the right moments. The jester makes an off-color joke involving turnips. You don't laugh, but your squire does. Loudly, the dragon dies with a spectacular flop. Everyone claps. You walk back to the manor in the soft pink light of late afternoon, the scent of roasted onions in the air again. A pigeon coos above you. The ledger waits inside, half-read. You promise yourself you'll finish it. Maybe tomorrow. Probably never. And with that, you climb the stairs, untie your belt, and sit quietly, looking out at the fields you walked this morning. They haven't changed, but you feel just a little lighter. You rise slower today. It's not that you're more tired than usual, though your back argues otherwise. It's just that the bed, as uneven and lumpy as it is, has finally molded itself into a shape resembling your spine. A small victory. You blink against the soft glow of dawn pouring through the narrow slits of your chamber window. Those arrow-sized holes that generously let in both light and every breeze that ever wandered across the English countryside. Downstairs, someone's already poking at the hearth, coaxing last night's embers into a reluctant flame. You can hear the fire whisper and hiss, protesting like an old gossip who's been awoken too early. There's a clatter of pewter bowls, and then, inevitably, the bubbling sigh of pottage heating for the fourth day in a row. It smells faintly of barley, cabbage, and something that once resembled flavor. You yawn. You stretch. You ignore the itching bite on your ankle. You can't decide whether it's a flea or a punishment from St. Cuthbert for skipping last week's Mass. Your squire appears again, bright-eyed, armed with a slightly crooked wooden comb and a tunic that still smells faintly of the tanner's shop. You note the enthusiasm in his gait. He has the energy of someone who still believes knighthood is about glory. You, however, know it's mostly about managing hay. You ask him the day of the week. He doesn't know. Neither do you. Today, you've decided, is the day you will write a letter. Not a declaration of love or a call to arms. Those are for poets and actual battles. But a very official, very dull letter to the steward of a neighboring estate. Apparently, there's a boundary stone that has mysteriously moved about 12 paces east, and now both of you claim the same blackberry bush. You descend the narrow staircase, one hand brushing the stone wall. You pass a tapestry that you've never liked. Too much blue, not enough symmetry. In the hall, your clerk awaits. He's wearing spectacles made of horn, squinting at a scrap of vellum like it just insulted his mother. "Ready, sir," he says. You dictate, slowly, and with all the grace of someone unsure of grammar. Your Latin is functional, like a chicken that can almost fly. The clerk writes in neat, spidery script, pausing only to dip his quill and blow on the ink like it's soup. The letter reads, "To the steward of West Glenthorne, regarding the movement of the border stone near the northern hedgerow, I express grave concern and the desire to settle this peacefully. As you are no doubt aware, such acts, whether by man or cow, risk undermining the sanctity of mutual trust between estates." You trail off for a moment and tell the clerk to add something about God. That always makes things seem more serious. You sign it with your seal, a cracked chunk of red wax pressed by a brass ring you inherited from an uncle who choked on a pigeon bone. Dignified, really. Your squire volunteers to deliver the message, likely imagining he'll face bandits or seduce a baker's daughter along the way. You don't correct him. Let him have this. With a morning wasted in bureaucracy, you allow yourself the luxury of walking through the manor's small orchard. It isn't much. 6 apple trees, patch of sage, a pear tree that only ever produces pears in years ending in 4. You pass the stone bench near the well. It's cold and uneven, but it's your favorite spot. You sit. A small girl from the village runs past, holding a doll made from rags and twine. She's pretending it's a princess. You remember dimly your own days of pretending, long before the mail shirt and the taxes and the headaches. The orchard smells like wood smoke and damp moss. Birds argue overhead in the branches. You let your eyes close for a moment. Just a moment. You're woken by the sound of someone clearing their throat politely. It's your steward. "There's a monk here, sir," he says. Says he's collecting stories for a chronicle. Ah, yes. This again. The monk enters the hall with all the solemnity of a man who hasn't smiled in 20 years. He's wearing a heavy brown robe and carries a scroll so long it's rolled around both elbows. "I am Brother Osric," he says. "I seek accounts of valor, divine miracles, and righteous deeds." You consider telling him about the time you rescued a goose from a bucket. Instead, you nod sagely and begin to invent. You describe a skirmish that happened near the marsh 5 years ago, how you and 3 retainers repelled a band of outlaws. In truth, it was probably just some drunk shepherds, but you add fog, flaming arrows, and a dying vow to St. George. Osric scribbles it down like it's gospel. For his part, he offers stories, too. Tales from other manors, other nights. Apparently, one knight in the north has taken a vow of silence and only communicates by pointing. Another claims he saw a swan bearing a golden cross. You both agree that sounds highly unlikely, but useful in a sermon. Here's your obscure fact of the day. Some medieval knights collected relics of saints, not for piety, but for prestige. One knight was rumored to have the thumb of Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of toothaches. He charged visiting nobles to touch it. 5 pence per finger. After Brother Osric leaves, scroll fuller. Truth somewhat optional. You spend a few minutes just watching the fire. There's a crack in the hearthstone shaped like a lopsided crown. You've stared at it so many times. You're convinced it shifts when no one's looking. Dinner is late. The cook's son tripped over a goose and dropped the stew. You get bread again. You try not to sigh. Evening falls. Outside, the stars blink through the low clouds, faint and flickering. Your squire returns from delivering the letter, covered in mud and pride. He has nothing to report, which is how you know it was a successful mission. You retire to your chamber, remove your boots, and sit at the edge of the bed. You look at your sword. You look at your empty ledger. You look at your calloused hands. And you wonder, not for the first time, if this quiet, repetitive life is what knighthood was supposed to be. Not banners or battles, but barley, boundaries, and the occasional goose crisis. But you're warm, you're dry, and today no one bled. That counts for something. You lie back, close your eyes, and listen to the soft rustle of leaves outside. Tomorrow might be different. The rain has been falling all night. You wake to its insistent tapping on the shutters, like a beggar asking for bread, and the soft squelch of mud where your boots should be. Someone left the window cracked open. Your squire, probably, in one of his heroic efforts to let in the morning air. Now the floor is damp, your blanket smells faintly of mildew, and your patience has already been worn down to a nub, and you haven't even stood up yet. Welcome to another thrilling episode of the night, who mostly waited for dry weather. You sit up slowly, spine creaking like the drawbridge of a forgotten castle, and glance around the room. A small spider has taken up residence in the corner. You watch it for a moment. It's working harder than you have all week. You respect that. Your squire enters without knocking. He's holding a pair of dripping boots and an expression of tragic optimism. "It's a good rain," he says, as if you needed the forecast. You nod, noncommittally, and reach for your outer tunic. It's still damp from yesterday. Everything is damp. The walls are damp. The stairs are damp. The very air is damp. You begin to suspect that you, too, may one day become damp and moss-covered and forgotten by time. Downstairs, the fire is struggling. The kitchen girl stokes it with a poker, but it coughs weak little sparks and sulks. Breakfast today. Surprise, warm pottage. It has become your most loyal companion. Always there, always bland, always just on the edge of being food. But today you eat fast. Because today, believe it or not, is market day. Once a month, the manor's outer field transforms into a patchy, chaotic sprawl of stalls, carts, animals, mud, and voices. People come from neighboring villages, bringing produce, tools, gossip, pickpockets, and unsolicited singing. You step outside, cloak pulled tight, and squint at the sky. The clouds are low and gray, like a ceiling built by someone on a tight budget. The ground squelches beneath your boots. A duck waddles past, seemingly amused. The path to the market is already bustling. A cart of onions overtakes you. A woman holding a bucket of eels nods respectfully. Children sprint through puddles with the reckless joy of those who don't do their own laundry. You hear a fiddle somewhere in the distance, stubbornly cheerful despite the drizzle. You approach the edge of the field and take in the full glory of the marketplace. It smells like wet wool, turnips, fried dough, and ambition. A blacksmith is hammering nails beside a cooper's stall. The cooper, for reasons unknown, is arguing with a priest about barrel sizes. The priest insists it's a moral issue. The cooper insists it's physics. You steer wide of both. You pass by a man selling miracle herbs that promise to cure gout, nightmares, and broken hearts. You ask if they also cure taxes. He does not laugh. Fun fact for today. Many knights were expected to oversee the market's fairness, enforcing weights and measures. You've brought your set of calibrated stones for exactly this reason, though you haven't used them since the last time someone tried to pass off a dog as a lamb. You make a show of inspecting a merchant's scale and then dramatically compare 2 carats. They're the same. Or not. You nod as if you know the difference. At a nearby stall, a weaver displays fabrics dyed in deep greens and blues. They're coarse but vivid. Your squire runs his fingers along one and asks if he can buy a scarf. You raise an eyebrow. For who, you ask? He turns red. Doesn't answer. The tanner's tent, mercifully downwind, offers leather goods, mostly belts and satchels, though he claims he once made a saddle for a noble who could neither sit nor ride. You don't ask how that worked. Then there's the entertainment. A juggler performs beneath a makeshift canopy of canvas and twine. He tosses 3 apples, then 4, then sneezes mid-throw and nearly hits a monk. The monk forgives him, barely. Further down, a man with a puppet on each hand reenacts a famous battle. The puppets are crude, the script worse, but the children love it. One of the puppets is clearly a reused sock. You consider commissioning a puppet of yourself. A tiny wooden knight who mostly says things like, "Have you paid your grain tax? And that pig is not yours." And then you spot her. Old Marta, the fortune teller. She sets up at every market, wrapped in shawls, rings on every finger, and a voice like rustling paper. She doesn't claim to see the future, exactly. More like possibilities. You walk over. Why not? It's raining. You've eaten your fill of onions, and you're curious. She squints up at you. "Still haven't fallen off that horse of yours?" She says. You nod. "Not yet." She takes your hand and mutters nonsense over your palm. Something about journeys. Something about storms. Something about mutton. You thank her and leave before she charges extra. Here's an obscure cultural tidbit for you. Some medieval markets included trial by touch, where suspected criminals would have to retrieve a stone from boiling water to prove innocence. You eye the stew pot boiling nearby and decide you'd rather take your chances with local gossip. Around midday, you take shelter under the ale tent. It's not fancy, but the beer is mildly warm and vaguely bitter. You drink with 3 local farmers who argue about the best way to plant onions. You have no opinion, but say MMM thoughtfully. A drummer starts up, his rhythm slow and hypnotic. You feel your eyelids droop. Rain drums against the canvas overhead like a lullaby. For a moment, you almost drift. But then your squire arrives, frantic. The pig is missing again. You sigh. You stand. You follow him back into the mud and chaos. Because being a knight means tracking down livestock, just as often as it means brandishing a sword. Probably more. You find the pig, eventually, chewing through a crate of cabbages. You return it. You apologize. You pretend this was a noble deed. By dusk, the market thins. Tents collapse, wagons creak away, and the ground is a war zone of footprints and trampled radishes. You walk back to the manor slowly, cloak heavy with rain, boots caked in mud, and brain fogged with barley ale and puppet dialogue. Your bed is still cold when you reach it. The fire has gone out. Your hands are sore. Your squire is snoring on a sheepskin in the corner. But the pig is home, and you didn't have to duel anyone. That's a win. You close your eyes, and the rain keeps falling, soft and steady, like time itself forgetting. The sky is a blanket of ash this morning. There's no sunrise, just a slow brightening, like a candle reluctantly lit in the far corner of a room. You sit up in bed, every joint announcing its presence like a village crier. The fire in your hearth is dead. The chamber is cold. Your breath puffs in front of you. For a moment, you wonder if you've become part of the stone wall. You listen. No footsteps. No clatter of pots. No squire. Unusual. You stand, stretch, and call out, voice scratchy. "Edric." No reply. You wrap yourself in your thickest tunic, undyed wool, stiff in the shoulders, and trudge down the stairs. The hall is oddly still. No crackling fire. No muttering servants. No morning pottage fumes assaulting your nose. Just silence. Then, finally, a voice. "Sir." Your squire comes bolting in from a side door, hair soaked, boots splattered with what looks suspiciously like chicken droppings. There's a fire. In the village. The Thatcher's cottage. Ah, so that's the smell. You don't wait. You're already pulling on your cloak, shouting for the reeve and 2 of the farmhands. Fires don't wait for formalities. You grab a pail, though you know Even now, it won't help much. By the time you reach the village, a crowd has gathered. Smoke curls into the gray sky like a black snake. The cottage roof is gone. Flames are mostly out, but the damage is done. Ash, smoldering beams, the half-melted handle of a cooking pot sticking out from what was once a hearth. The thatcher and his wife stand nearby, faces pale, their belongings in a smoking heap. Clothes, a broken bench, a small wooden box scorched but intact. You walk up slowly, kneel beside the box. Inside, 3 silver buttons, a child's spoon, and a single braid of golden hair tied with wool string. You say nothing, just nod, stand, and tell the reeve to bring them blankets. The steward will arrange temporary shelter. The church will open its store of dried peas and beans. Will you rebuild it? Your squire whispers. You nod, because you will. It's your land, your people. That's your job, even if you didn't ask for it. Historical fact of the day. Many knights, especially landed ones, acted as local administrators and caretakers. When things went wrong, fires, floods, famine, they were expected to help, not just fight. You were your people's protector, even if the enemy was mildew or bad luck. You spend the rest of the morning walking the village perimeter, checking for signs the fire might spread. Still hot cinders, sparks caught in thatch. Everything smells like charred bread and wet straw. Children chase each other barefoot through the ash. Life doesn't wait. By midday, you're back at the manor, slumped in a chair, boots steaming beside the hearth. The cook has brought you something that tastes marginally like stew and looks suspiciously like yesterday's pottage. You eat it anyway. Your squire sits across from you, scribbling something with coal on a bit of scrap parchment. You ask what he's doing. Writing down the day. He says, so I remember it. You raise an eyebrow. You think it's worth remembering? He nods, very seriously. You say nothing. You head outside again, this time to check on the stables. The horses are fine. Stephen greets you with a grunt and a swish of his tail. You pat his neck. He ignores you. The stable boy, a lad named Hob, informs you that one of the foals kicked a hole in the fencing and escaped. You sigh. Again, this foal has already escaped twice. It may be the most ambitious creature on the estate. You join Hob in walking the fence line. The mud squelches underfoot. You spot the broken slat, follow the trail of prints into the woods, and finally find the foal standing serenely in a glade, surrounded by mushrooms and looking proud of himself. Retrieving him is undignified. There's slipping. There's coaxing. There may even be bribing, with apples. You say nothing of this to the steward. As you lead the foal back to the barn, you pass a hedgerow full of early snowdrops, those tiny white flowers that bloom when the world is still cold and gray. You pause. They're delicate, pointless, and somehow more stubborn than anything else in the field. Here's your weird cultural tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, snowdrops were believed to be sacred flowers, signs from angels that winter would end. Of course, others believed they were unlucky and never brought them indoors. You decide not to test either theory. Back at the manor, the steward reminds you. The Baron's messenger is due tomorrow. You groan internally. It means cleaning the hall, preparing a formal dinner, and wearing the ceremonial tunic, the one with the stiff collar that always itches. You agree anyway. Politics is mostly about tolerance of fabric, egos, and endless greetings. Evening settles. The fire in the hearth is finally cheerful, crackling with fresh oak. You sit in your favorite chair, a mug of small ale in hand, not strong enough to dull your senses, but warm enough to soothe your bones. The village is quieted. The Thatcher's family is asleep in the church loft. You made sure the priest opened it for them. Your squire, somehow still full of energy, sharpens your eating knife with a whetstone. You remind him, gently, that it's already sharp. He insists he's practicing. You nod. Let him learn. Later, as the manor quiets, you walk alone outside for a moment. The sky has cleared. Stars blink like distant embers. You pull your cloak tight and breathe in deep. The air smells like earth and cold smoke. And hope. You think about the Thatcher's little box. The braid of hair. You wonder if she's still alive, his daughter. Perhaps married now. Or gone. You'll never ask. But tomorrow, you'll help rebuild the roof. Personally, because that's what knights do. You return inside, close the heavy door, stare into the fire, and you rest, because you've earned it. The sky is pretending to be cheerful this morning. You notice it as soon as you step outside. The clouds have broken apart into scattered wisps, and a sliver of pale blue stretches above the treetops, like someone's trying to repaint the world in gentler colors. The air is crisp, but less cruel. Somewhere nearby, a lark dares to sing. You suspect it's an optimist. Back inside, the manor is already humming with preparation. The steward's voice bounces off the stone walls, issuing instructions with the grim enthusiasm of a man who knows too well that nothing will be ready on time. Today, you are receiving a messenger from your liege lord, the baron of this patch of muddy, rain-soaked heaven, and while you're not expected to lay down a feast fit for a king, you are expected to look like you haven't spent the last 3 days chasing livestock, solving disputes over barley boundaries, or personally retrieving a wayward foal from the underbrush. You almost feel regal as your squire helps you into your ceremonial tunic. It's dark green, dyed with woad and onion skins, no less, and lined with a scratchy trim that reminds you why you usually avoid wearing it. The collar feels like penance. The boots, however, shine. You don't ask how long he spent polishing them, but judging from the smug look on his face, you suspect he skipped breakfast for it. In the hall, the trestle table is cleared and scrubbed. The bench cushions have been beaten and rearranged, and someone, probably the cook's daughter, has laid out a jug of cider, fresh bread, and a plate of smoked trout that smells far better than anything you've eaten in a week. A branch of rosemary has been placed in a jar at the center of the table. You pause to admire the effort. Then you straighten your tunic, adjust your belt, and take your place by the hearth. It doesn't take long. The messenger arrives with 2 guards in tow, both dust-covered and hollow-eyed from the road. His cloak is thick, his boots heavy with dried mud, and his expression somewhere between exhaustion and mild contempt. A face that says, "I've read your tax report, and yes, we're going to talk about it." You greet him with the standard pleasantries, offering him a seat and a drink. He accepts both, if not warmly, at least professionally. His name, he says, is Sir Herwin. You nod, pretending to recognize it. Then comes the scroll. It's long, unreasonably so, rolled tight, sealed twice, and bound with a ribbon that you suspect cost more than your entire spring barley yield. He unrolls it slowly, as if savoring your anticipation, then reads in a flat, nasal tone, "By order of Baron Aldrich of Den's Fold, Knight of the Marches, Keeper of the 3 Keys, Warden of the Riverlands." The titles continue. You stop listening somewhere around Defender of the Lesser Shrines. You are hereby summoned to appear at the Spring Council in 3 weeks' time, to present your estate's quarterly accounting, review the Oath of Fealty, and partake in the seasonal judgments of your jurisdiction. You nod slowly. This is not unexpected, but inconvenient? Absolutely. Spring Council means riding north for 2 days, sleeping in a cold stone keep, with far too many men pretending to be important, and sitting through hours of discussions about grain levies and canal maintenance, while trying not to fall asleep. It also means wearing your best armor, not because you'll need it, but because everyone else will, and remembering which minor knight insulted whom last autumn. Still you bow. You accept the summons. That's what knights do. As the messenger drinks his cider and eyes the fish, you ask how the roads are. He sighs, says something about flooded crossings and broken bridges, and mentions a village where a woman tried to pay her toll with a single onion and a blessing. You nod solemnly. Sounds about right. He delivers 2 more documents, one a revised tax chart, the other a list of acceptable border punishments for trespassers. You skim both. The first raises the levy on wool. The second clarifies that, no, you cannot throw someone in a pond as a form of trial. You're mildly disappointed. After the formalities, you offer the messenger a guest bed for the night. He accepts, albeit stiffly. You notice his fingers twitch toward his coin purse. You wave him off, no charge. He softens slightly. Your squire, meanwhile, is staring at the messenger's sword like it's Excalibur. You make a note to have him polish yours later, just to remind him whose name is carved into the hilt. When the messenger retires, You return to the hall. The fire is still burning. The bread's gone stale. The rosemary has wilted. You sit. You think. You remember the last spring council. How one night nearly choked on a pheasant bone while trying to recite the oath. How a baron's wife flirted with 3 different squires and then challenged a priest to chess. How you lost an entire morning trying to explain why your pigs kept escaping and why that had everything to do with your grain yield being low. You wonder what new drama awaits. And here's your historical nugget. Spring councils and similar feudal gatherings were real, often dull affairs where minor nobles had to reaffirm their loyalty, present accounts, and be seen. Being seen was crucial. Power wasn't just about force. It was about presence. Appear, nod, survive the feast, and go home before someone challenges you to a duel over bread salt etiquette. The rest of the day passes in preparation. You visit the armory, such as it is. A small wooden room with racks of mismatched spears, 3 chainmail shirts of varying size and smell, and your own set of armor hanging like a rusting ghost. You run your fingers over the chest plate. It still fits. Mostly. You instruct your squire to oil the leather straps and check the helmet for mold. Later, you walk the edge of your fields, thinking of what to bring to council. A gift of smoked trout, a scroll of your tax figures, a bribe. Historians still debate how much gift-giving at such councils was ceremonial and how much was strategic lubrication for smoother conversation. At sunset, you return to your orchard. The snowdrops have multiplied. A few brave violets peek out. The foal is asleep in the shade, finally tired of escaping. You lean against your least crooked tree and close your eyes for a moment. You are a knight, not the kind sung about in songs, not the one in polished armor on a white steed slaying dragons, but the kind who holds the roof over others' heads, the kind who nods through scrolls and digs in mud and smooths over border disputes with the patience of a saint or a very tired uncle. You walk back as twilight stretches its fingers across the hills. Inside, the hall is dark and quiet. Your squire has fallen asleep by the fire again. The messenger snores upstairs. You sit down with your ledger. You stare at the same half-finished page from a week ago. You turn it, and you begin a new one. Morning does not come so much as gather itself. It waits a while behind a low mist and a sky the color of old parchment, creeping softly through cracks in the shutters and under the door, hesitant, as if unsure it should even bother. You're already awake, staring at the beams above your bed. They haven't changed since yesterday, but you find something oddly reassuring about that. You rise slowly. Your bones are still holding a grudge from yesterday's orchard walk. You run your hands through your hair, tug on your thickest socks, still slightly damp, and sigh as you swing your legs over the side of the bed. Today is a travel day, at least part of it. You don't particularly want to leave, but duty has a way of arriving with scrolls and messengers instead of reasons. Downstairs, your squire is trying, unsuccessfully, to secure a saddlebag to your horse. You watch for a moment from the doorway. He has the determination of a martyr and the coordination of a wounded duck. You clear your throat. He startles, almost ties the bag to his own boot, then finally manages a reasonable knot. You nod approvingly and say nothing. Breakfast is an oat cake the cook insists is fresh, which here means not yet stone. You gnaw at it as you walk the stables, checking Stephen's shoes. They're solid for once. The farrier must have visited recently. That's a relief. You don't need a repeat of last year's council ride, when you had to limp into the Baron's courtyard with a horse that looked like it had walked through a battlefield barefoot. You've decided to depart the next day, not today. One more day to prepare. One more day to finish the grain tally. One more day to quietly dread the spring council, like a child awaiting a particularly unpleasant baptism. Your steward catches your mid-oat cake. Sir, the reeve requests your judgment on the matter of the cheese wheel. You blink. What cheese wheel? He shifts his weight. Apparently, there is a dispute over ownership between Farmer Alric and Widow Fenna. You swallow what's left of your breakfast, wash it down with tepid cider, and follow the steward to the granary. There, beneath the watchful eyes of half the village, sits the cheese wheel, round, squat, dusted with flour to keep off the flies, and clearly the pride of someone's dairy. Alric says it's his, made with his cow's milk and aged in his cellar. Fenna says it's hers, made with her herbs and stored in her cloth. Neither has witnesses. You listen, nod, and ponder. You could split the cheese, literally, but that feels cruel. This will has been carefully aged for months. To cut it would be a small sacrilege. You ask if either will take an oath. Both hesitate. Fenna steps forward, swears by Saint Ethelgard. Alric hesitates, just a moment too long. You rule in Fenna's favor. She cries. Alric grumbles. You promise him an extra measure of salt come summer. Another trial settled. Here's your historical fact of the day. Knights, especially those on rural manors, often acted as manorial judges, arbitrating everything from livestock theft to fencing rights to, yes, cheese disputes. The manor court was both law and theater, a stage where dignity and cabbage often collided. By midday, the fog has lifted, revealing a weak sun and the far hills shimmering like old coins. You take the opportunity to review your list of council duties. It's longer than you remember. Present tax records. Swear fealty again. Attend 2 feasts. Sit for 3 days of hearings. Avoid Sir Cedric of Stone Marsh, who still insists you owe him a wine cask. Avoid his dog, which bit your squire last year. You close the list. You open your ledger. You stare at the numbers. You close the ledger. Instead, you walk the grounds. The manor is calm today. A rare kind of peace hangs over it. Not from satisfaction, exactly, but from exhaustion. The villagers are tending to their plots. The orchard is alive with bees. Even the foal, rebellious soul that he is, seems content to chew a fence post instead of vaulting over it. You pass the well and notice something new. A bundle of dried herbs tied above the stones with twine. Not a water-purifying practice. A charm. Your squire notices you staring. They say it keeps the spirits away, he says. Do the spirits drink from the well now, you ask. He grins. Only when the cider runs out. You laugh, just a little. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, villagers tied herbs like verbena, rue, and St. John's wort above wells and doorways. Not for flavor, but protection. Not all ghosts are dramatic. Some are petty. A cow dying or a toothache spreading could easily be blamed on a spirit that slipped in through the wrong window. You leave the well alone. That night, supper is smoked fish again. You eat slowly, thoughtfully, with one hand resting on the table. Your squire tries to impress the steward by recounting the cheese trial with added drama. He gives you far too much credit. You smile, let him tell it, and sip your ale. After supper, you polish your helm. The metal catches the firelight. It's older than your squire, dented in 2 places, neither from battle. One from falling off a shelf during a thunderstorm, the other from you dropping it during a bee incident. Still, it looks noble enough. Your sword, too, you check. You run your thumb along the edge. Still dull. Still ceremonial. Still a reminder that your battles are rarely won in blood, but in decisions, in patience, in showing up again and again, even when no one sings about you. As the manor quiets, you light a candle and return to the window of your chamber. The stars are faint tonight, blinking behind a gauze of clouds. You feel not tired, not exactly awake either, just full of thoughts, of lists, of memories. You think of Fenna's face when you ruled in her favor. You think of the Baron's council chamber, cold stone, long benches, echoes of boots on tile. You think of your people, of how none of them ask you to be a hero, just present. You blow out the candle. The flame flutters once, then disappears, and the dark welcomes you like an old friend. You wait before the rooster crows, not because of any noble instinct, mind you, but because your left hip has decided to start aching in new and imaginative ways. You shift. You groan. The straw mattress groans back. Somewhere outside, a bird stirs, then gives up and goes back to sleep. You envy that bird with the deepest sincerity your rank can allow. The hearth in your chamber is cold. Not the poetic kind of cold, just the bone-deep, finger-stiffening chill that sneaks under tunics and curls into joints. You sit up slowly, wrap your wool cloak over your shoulders, and mutter something about moving south next winter. You've said that every year since you were 29. Downstairs, the fire is already lit. The cook, bless her early rising heart, has hot cider brewing and something not pottage on the table. It's barley cakes, slightly burnt, but they smell divine. You eat two without sitting down, nod to the kitchen maid, and nearly trip over the dog asleep by the door. Today is departure day. Not a battle, not a hunt, just a long cold, muddy ride to a council where you'll nod politely and pretend to enjoy boiled goose while debating the local mill's grain quota. Your squire is outside saddling Stephen. The horse looks miserable. His ears flick in protest at the saddle blanket. You walk over, pat his side, and offer him half a barley cake. He eats it without gratitude, then sneezes directly into your boot. The sun is barely up when you set off. The road is quiet, washed clean by last week's rain. Puddles glint dully under the trees. The forest smells of damp earth, wet bark, and something faintly metallic. Your squire rides beside you, humming an old harvest song off-key. You let him. You're too tired to scold. You pass familiar places. The mossy outcrop where you once lost your coin pouch. The broken fence that still hasn't been repaired. The crossroads tree where a shepherd tied red thread to ask for fair weather. All unchanged. All exactly as they were. Somewhere past the halfway marker, your squire asks what the council will be like. You answer honestly. Boring. Long smells of wax and garlic. Lots of talking, little doing. He nods like you've told him a secret. Here's your historical fact of the day. Most feudal councils were dominated not by dramatic political intrigue, but by endless administration. Who owed what? Who built what? And who was fined for letting their pigs wander into a neighbor's barley field. High medieval drama happened in poems. Real knights argued about irrigation ditches. As the sun rises higher, you stop for a short rest near a stream. You tie the horses loosely to a tree and sit on a damp rock, chewing a strip of dried venison that tastes like punishment. Your squire walks down to skip stones. He throws three badly. The fourth hits something under the water that lets out a low, wet gurgle. You both pretend not to notice. Back on the road, you talk a bit more. He asks if you ever wanted to leave, really leave. Not just for council or war or pilgrimage, but to vanish. Start over. Somewhere with warmer air and fewer duties. You think. You answer slowly. Sometimes, you say, but who would feed Stephen? He laughs. You do too, just a little. By mid-afternoon, you're nearing the outer holdings of the barony. The land changes. Fields are bigger, hedges neater, and there are more horses on the road, most carrying knights in nicer cloaks than yours. Some ride alone, some in pairs. One nods to you. You nod back. No one speaks. Because here's the truth. Nobility is a quiet performance. It isn't about gold or banners. It's about how well you can keep your back straight when your boots are soaked through. How calmly you listen to someone explain a tax law that contradicts the previous one. How politely you decline a toast when your stomach says, please no more duck fat. The castle comes into view just before sundown. It's not enormous. No soaring towers or shimmering flags. Just a squat, weathered fortress of gray stone, surrounded by a moat that mostly smells of algae and regret. You cross the drawbridge with Stephen snorting at every splash. Inside the gate, you dismount and are met by a page barely old enough to hold his own sword. He bows, takes your horse, and leads you toward the guest chambers. You're shown to a narrow room with one bed, one stool, and a basin that appears to have been last used by a cat. You thank him, close the door, and sit heavily. Your squire enters a few moments later, arms full of your saddlebags. He dumps them, flops on the floor, and groans. Was that only one day? You smile. Welcome to nobility. You allow yourself a short rest before the evening feast. You change into your council tunic, the one that smells faintly of cedar and obligation. You fasten your cloak with the pin that bears your family crest, a fox with a vine in its mouth, symbolizing, well, something that sounded important when your grandfather invented it. The great hall is already buzzing. Candles flicker in wrought iron sconces. Banners hang from beams. Long tables stretch beneath a timber ceiling, so high it could hide a small choir. Servants dart between benches, pouring ale and placing platters of roast meat, turnips, and pies shaped like songbirds. You take your seat among the lesser knights, near the window, far from the high table. This suits you. From here, you can eat in peace and avoid conversation with men who think strategy is interrupting people loudly. The Baron enters last, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in fur despite the heat. He raises a goblet, offers a short blessing that mentions St. Eustace for some reason, and sits. Then the feast begins. There's duck with plum sauce, spiced lentils, onion tarts, and something claiming to be pear stew. You eat carefully. You sip ale. You nod when spoken to. You let the talk wash over you. Grain rot, border disputes, the new toll road that everyone hates, but no one will challenge. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. In medieval courts, public silence was often a tactic. Many knights believed that the fewer words you said, the wiser you seemed. You've made a career out of that belief. Your squire is seated at a servant's table near the wall. He waves once. You pretend not to see him. He's trying to balance a forkful of pie and failing. The Baron calls for music. A pair of lutanists begin a slow tune, something about a fox stealing a maiden's ribbon. No one listens. The room fills with the low hum of men who've eaten too much and drunk even more. You lean back. You close your eyes for a moment. You're not home, but you're not in battle either. You are in the in-between, the quiet weight of a duty done, a day survived, and another to endure. You sip the last of your ale. The candles flicker lower, and the sound of distant laughter floats just beneath the music. Tomorrow begins the council. Tonight, you've earned your bread, and for once, your bed is warm. You sleep, but not deeply. The castle bed is stuffed with something. Hay, maybe straw, possibly crushed pine cones, and though it's technically softer than your manor sleeping arrangement, it has that particular noble quality of being unforgiving. You toss once, twice, then give up entirely around the third cock's crow, just before the sun begins to paint the stone wall with that same old smear of golden light that somehow manages to look both holy and condescending. You swing your legs over the side, wincing as your toes meet the cold floor. You mutter a quiet prayer to St. Cuthbert, or perhaps St. Ointment, if one exists, to bless your knees and hips for another day of polite nodding and prolonged sitting. Today is Council Day 1. You dress slowly, not in your armor, not yet. Armor will come tomorrow, when the lords parade themselves in iron and polished steel like geese in a pond show. Today, it's the council tunic again, your best belt, and a cloak that once belonged to your uncle, who wore it to a duel over almond prices. He lost. The cloak, however, is warm and well-lined. Downstairs, the castle hall is coming alive. Servants rush to and fro like mice with deadlines, setting out trenchers, warming cider, arranging chairs in impossibly straight lines. You dodge a boy carrying a basin of goose fat, then duck under a hanging tapestry that nearly swallows you whole. It depicts the Baron's alleged ancestor stabbing a stag with a sword the size of a boat. You're fairly certain the scene never happened, but you respect the effort. You find your seat in the side chamber, the council room, technically called the Chamber of Accord, though last year it hosted a fistfight over manure rights. You sit in the third row, behind a knight with a neck like a barrel, and beside a quiet fellow you dimly remember from an ill-fated boar hunt. Here's your historical fact of the day. Medieval councils were not grand, unified spectacles. They were fractious, tiring, and extraordinarily local. Lords and knights gathered in such meetings not to shape nations, but to argue over bridges, tolls, marriages, livestock, and whether a man can be fined twice for the same goat. Spoiler, he can. The chamber fills. Pages hand out copies of the meeting's agenda, scratched on parchment so thin you can see through it. You scan the list. Review of winter grain levies. Report on western border patrols. Petition from the monastery of St. Havric, Rhe. Missing wine barrels. Request for new milling charter. Ongoing complaint from Lord Berwin Rhe. Fish theft. Feast planning for midsummer. You sigh softly and adjust your seat. The Baron enters with minimal fanfare. He wears a ring on every finger and has the look of a man who's been holding in a sneeze for 3 years. He raises a hand. The room hushes. Let us begin. he says, voice low and gravelly. What follows is miraculously more boring than expected. The grain levies take a full hour. The steward drones on, reading numbers in a tone so flat it could sand wood. You learn that your manor's barley output is up by 2.6 stone, that wheat is down due to blight, and that oats remain respectably unremarkable. You nod at this, as if it's a compliment. Next come the patrol reports. A young knight, barely sprouted a beard, stands to explain how he chased off 3 men attempting to poach deer near the border. He uses the word ambushed, but you know full well it was probably a group of hungry shepherds with pointy sticks. Still, he puffs out his chest as he tells it. Then comes the monastery petition. A rotund monk, red-faced and breathless, waddles to the front of the chamber. He explains, at length, that barrels of sacramental wine have been disappearing from the abbey cellar. He suspects bandits, or possibly spirits. He uses the word miraculously emptied 4 times. The Baron raises one eyebrow. Have you considered your own brothers might be drinking it? The monk blinks. We have considered all possibilities. Laughter stirs in the hall. The monk pouts, returns to his seat. Next, the mill. A short man with a comb-over insists he has the right to build a new mill downstream. His cousin disagrees. Strongly, they begin shouting over one another until the Baron bangs his cup on the table and declares, "The river is not yours. It is mine. Share it, or I'll drain it." The room is quiet for a long time. Then, Lord Berwin and the fish. Ah, Berwin. Ancient angular, always angry. This is the 4th year in a row he has appeared with a scroll and a drawing of a fish he believes was stolen from his private pond. No one believes him, but no one dares dismiss him either, because one time he bit a steward on the hand. Today, Berwin insists the thief wore green stockings and smelled of mint. You avoid eye contact. Finally, the feast. Plans are laid for the midsummer celebration. A hog roast. A tournament. A puppet show. Someone suggests fireworks. The Baron narrows his eyes and mutters something about last time involving singed eyebrows and a ruined tapestry. And with that, the session adjourns. You stand slowly. Your back creaks like an old church door. Your squire finds you in the corridor, holding 2 mugs of watered wine. You take one, sip, and grimace. He offers a sympathetic shrug. How is it, he asks. You give him a look. Did anyone die? You pause. Only my enthusiasm. You walk together through the stone corridors, your steps echoing. You pass servants lighting wall sconces, 2 knights arguing about wheat tariffs, and a very determined goose that seems to have entered the castle by accident. No one dares move it. That evening, the fire in your guest chamber burns high. You sit beside it, boots off, cloak draped over your shoulders. Your sword lies beside you, untouched. Your squire dozes in a corner, holding a scroll he meant to copy. Ink stains his fingers. His head bobs. You hear music in the hall, soft lute, a low drum. Men singing songs about wars they never fought in, and women who likely never existed. You remember your own first council. You were younger, hungrier, eager to prove yourself. You wore armor too big and drank too much spiced wine. You made a speech about forestry rights that made an abbot choke on a turnip. Now you watch. You listen. You endure. That is what knights do. Outside, the stars appear again. Silent, patient, older than every banner in the hall. You lean your head back, close your eyes, and you sleep. Just a little deeper this time. The next morning, you sleep in, though only by a night's standard, which is to say, you wake after the first bell but before the second, and you manage to stay in bed for a full 3 extra minutes without anyone summoning you or shouting about a runaway horse, a missing cheese wheel, or a monk claiming divine theft. You lie still for a moment, listening to the muffled hum of castle life, continuing outside your room. Carts rolling across cobblestones, the sharp clink of armor, the occasional frustrated grunt from someone who's clearly lost a boot. It's a symphony of mildly irritated routine. You stretch, sit up, and assess your joints. Knees passable, back stiff, neck mysteriously angry despite doing absolutely nothing strenuous yesterday. You rotate your shoulders. Something pops. You hope it wasn't important. When you finally rise and dress, you do so slowly, an act of defiance more than necessity. You button each loop with regal indifference, knowing that no one's waiting for you to save a village or slay a dragon this morning. No, this morning is for negotiation. Council Day 2. You dread it more than any duel. There is something uniquely exhausting about the second day of a medieval council. It lacks the ceremonial momentum of the first and the release of the last. It is the long middle, a place where dreams go to be reviewed, voted on, and rewritten in triplicate. Downstairs, you find a crust of brown bread and a cup of watered ale waiting for you at the hall table. You eat standing up, as does everyone else. No one wants to linger. Everyone knows what's coming. Today, you're part of the subcommittee. Yes, that subcommittee. The one tasked with reviewing border complaints between the western estates, including the eternally bitter feud between Sir Wystan of Grell Hollow and Lady Melwine of Hartbarrow. A feud that, by your count, has lasted through 3 barons, 4 reeves, and 1 alleged duel conducted entirely by written insults. You meet in a small stone chamber off the main hall. It smells of wax and dried herbs, and the kind of ambition that never quite makes it to the throne room. There are 6 of you. You take your seat. Lady Melwine arrives with an entourage of 1, a quiet servant girl holding a rolled map and a basket of pears. Sir Wystan arrives with an entourage of 5, his steward, 2 overdressed guards, and what appears to be his cousin's cousin, who contributes nothing except a constant scowl. They sit on opposite sides of the room. You are in the middle. The map is unrolled. It's old, very old. Faded ink, worn corners, and 1 curious stain that looks like someone once used it as a platter for roast lamb. It shows 2 fields, a creek, and a hedgerow. Lady Melwine claims the hedgerow marks the true border, and that Sir Wystan has allowed his pigs to graze well beyond it. Sir Wystan insists the creek is the true border, and that the hedgerow is recent botanical fabrication. They argue, politely. For now, you listen, nod, ask questions you already know the answers to, because that's your job, not to solve the problem, but to sift it. Here's your historical fact of the day. Medieval knights, especially those trusted by barons, often served as mediators in land disputes. And disputes weren't just about fields. They were about pride, memory, old blood. You ask if either has a copy of the original land grant. Both do. Neither match. You ask if the pigs have caused damage. Lady Melwine produces a slightly flattened melon. This was once round, she says. Sir Wystan mutters something about vegetable dramatics. Eventually, you propose a compromise. The land between hedgerow and creek shall remain neutral ground. Pigs allowed, melons not. It is a ridiculous solution, but it works. They agree. For now, you leave the chamber weary, but victorious. And for your trouble, Lady Melwine gives you one of the pears. It is overripe. You eat it anyway. It tastes like the price of peace. Later that afternoon, you're summoned unexpectedly to a private audience with the Baron himself. This is never a good sign. You find him seated in a high-backed chair beside the hearth, sipping spiced wine, and reading what appears to be a list of complaints written entirely in red ink. "Ah," he says, without looking up. "My quiet night." You bow. He gestures for you to sit. You do, resisting the urge to comment on the 3 decorative swords above the fireplace, none of which have seen real combat. "I've heard," he says, finally meeting your eye, "that you've become something of a mediator." You say nothing. "I need someone to ride north, to the Brayford crossing. There's tension between 2 lords who both claim right to a ferry." "Of course there is. I'd go myself," he adds. "But," he gestures at the room, "duty." You nod slowly. "Will I have authority to settle it?" He smiles. "You'll have my name," which, in feudal terms, is roughly the same as being handed a sword made of parchment. Sharp in theory, fragile in reality. You agree, because knights agree. It's what we do. You return to your chamber that evening with sore legs, a full belly, and a vague sense of doom. You leave for Brayford in 2 days. Just enough time to enjoy one more terrible council feast. You sit by the fire. Your squire reads aloud from a poem someone scratched on the wall outside the latrine. It rhymes. Poorly, but it makes you laugh. That night, you dream of rivers, borders, and a pig wearing a crown. You do not sleep well, but you sleep honestly. And in the morning, you'll rise. Again, you wake to thunder. Not a storm, at least not the kind that lives in the sky. This thunder comes from below. Heavy footsteps in the stone corridors. A door slamming. The clatter of armor being adjusted too loudly by someone who probably isn't paid enough to care. You roll over and sigh. Today is the final day of the council. The day when, in theory, resolutions are made, declarations are declared, and everyone congratulates themselves for surviving 2.5 days of legal hand-wringing without committing treason or falling asleep into a trencher of spiced mutton. You pull yourself out of bed, slow and stiff. You put on your boots. You belt your tunic. You fasten the heavy traveling cloak you should have left folded for tomorrow. And then, just as you're reaching for your cup, you hear your squire's knock. He peeks in, eyes wide, breath short. "Sir, you'll want to come. There's been an incident." Ah, of course. Because what is a final day of council without an incident? You follow him through the narrow corridor, past a confused chambermaid, a trio of squabbling reeves, and a bard arguing with a servant over the number of strings his lute used to have. The castle is awake in the wrong way, buzzing, electric off-key. Outside the guest wing, 2 guards are standing at a door, arms crossed. Inside, Lord Haverick of Northmere, sitting cross-legged on the floor, covered in soot. Apparently, someone unknown, unseen, decided that lighting a pile of damp straw in Haverick's hearth would be a hilarious joke. And then, after the smoke flooded his chamber, cut the cord on his best tunic and replaced his ceremonial boots with wooden clogs. He is not amused. He gestures to you as if you are responsible. You are not, of course. Probably. You help him up anyway. He sneezes 3 times and asks if the council has already started. You tell him no, but if he doesn't change quickly, he'll have to wear the clogs. He glares. You resist the urge to laugh. Later, as you return to your chamber to retrieve your own scrolls, you hear the whispered word that now drifts through every hall. Sabotage. Because nothing inflates a minor act of vandalism like nobles and rumors. By the time you enter the council chamber for the final session, the entire room feels slightly scorched. The Baron is seated already, face blank, fingers drumming the arm of his chair like someone trying to remember where he last left his patients. "Let us begin," he says. Again, the first item, revisiting yesterday's milling charter. Apparently, someone found a map that contradicts the last map, which contradicted the first map. There's now a third cousin involved, and a goose. Of course. You sigh, deeply. This is your historical fact of the day. Many medieval councils failed to resolve simple disputes, not due to incompetence, but because of overlapping claims, oral traditions, inconsistent records, and the deeply human inability to admit when a hedge is moved. After an hour of circular debate, the Baron declares the matter to be considered further by spring, which of course means never. The next session concerns the Midsummer Fair. You suspect this was placed last on purpose. Everyone perks up. Suddenly, there's enthusiasm, a feast, a tournament, music, pie. One knight proposes a falconry contest, another a poetry duel. You pretend to write something important on your scroll to avoid being volunteered. Then Lady Melwine, yes, Cheesewheel Melwine, suggests that this year's tournament include a duel by silence. The room stills. She explains. 2 opponents sit, facing one another. No speaking, no blinking, no laughing. First to move loses. Sir Wystan, her favorite verbal opponent, scoffs. "Sounds like courting," he mutters. Laughter erupts. You note this idea has potential. The meeting closes with a round of affirmations. Each attending knight stands, affirms fealty, and offers one sentence about his estate. Most are dull. Some are absurd. One man stands and simply says, "All my pigs are accounted for," then sits again with pride. Finally, it is your turn. You rise. You clear your throat. You say simply, "Barley is good. Borders are calm. The foal has not escaped. A small ripple of laughter. You sit. The Baron nods. And with that, the council ends. There is no applause. Just a general exhale, the sound of bench legs scraping against stone, and the low hum of relief that only comes after surviving something long, uncomfortable, and vaguely necessary, like dental treatment or public theater. You retreat to the side hall. A feast awaits tonight, but for now, you seek silence. Just a small hour of peace. You find it in the orchard behind the castle, a modest stretch of fruit trees barely awake for the season, their branches twitching under weak sunlight. You sit beneath one, back against the trunk, and finally allow your shoulders to drop. Your squire appears some minutes later. He offers a jug of cider, 2 apples, and a questionable wedge of cheese. You accept all 3. Together, you sit and say nothing, until finally he asks, "Is it always like this?" "Counsel." You look at him. "No," you say. "Sometimes it's worse." He considers that. And then, "But it matters, doesn't it?" You nod. "Yes, it does. Not because of declarations or scrolls or signatures, but because someone showed up, because someone tried, because in a world where fires are frequent, pigs roam freely, and rivers shift their beds without asking, sometimes just being there is the most noble thing you can do. As the sun sets behind the castle, a bell rings for the evening feast. You rise. You walk back. Tomorrow, you'll ride to Brayford. More borders, more faces, more maps drawn in the dirt with sticks. But tonight you eat, you laugh, you breathe, and you are, for a moment, full. Not of food, not of duty, but of the quiet satisfaction of enduring without applause. The next morning comes with a new kind of silence. Not the sleepy, dust-laden quiet of a lazy manor morning. Not the suspicious quiet of missing pigs or runaway squires. No, this is the calm of departure. The hush that settles over stones still warm from the last fire, over beds no longer slept in, over corridors already swept clean of footprints. It is a travel day hush. You're up before most. Not because you're eager, Allo knows. No one is eager to travel north in late spring when the roads are still soft and the air smells like wet wool, but because you'd rather leave with the morning mist than with fanfare. You pack light. A single saddlebag, a short sword, your good cloak, and a map that may or may not be correct anymore. You bring the seal of the Baron, freshly pressed in red wax, on a letter authorizing you to mediate the dispute at Brayford Crossing. The letter smells faintly of garlic. The Baron gave it to you after the feast last night. You barely remember it, truthfully. There was roast goose, a puppet show that went on far too long, and an impromptu wrestling match between a drunken reeve and a lute player. At some point, the Baron clapped you on the back, handed you the scroll, and muttered, "You're the only one who listens before shouting." A backhanded compliment, but you'll take it. You finish dressing. Your squire, already waiting in the stable yard, is bouncing on his heels with excitement. He's packed enough provisions for 3 days, even though Brayford is only a 1-day ride. His eyes are bright. His boots are clean. He's wearing his sword, blunt, ceremonial, and mostly for posing, with an intensity that suggests he expects to be ambushed by trolls before lunchtime. Stephen the horse is less enthused. He stands stubborn and sleepy, flicking his ears at your approach. You mount. You nod to the steward who oversees the gate, and you ride. The castle falls behind you, its towers fading into the morning haze like ships sailing backward into fog. The road ahead is narrow, soft with recent rain, and marked by wheel ruts and hoof prints already half erased. You settle into the rhythm of travel, creaking saddle, birdsong, the occasional distant cough from your squire, who refuses to wear a scarf even when the wind bites. You pass familiar landmarks. The shrine to St. Lorne, its carved stone had recently cleaned by some pious soul. The twin oaks known as the Listening Sisters, where old folks swear you can hear the voices of lost loved ones if you sit quietly enough, and the mossy rock that bears a single, inexplicable carving of a snail. No one knows who made it. No one dares remove it. You stop briefly at a fork in the road, where a tanner's widow has set up a roadside stall selling bread. boiled eggs, and what she insists is medicinal cider. You buy 2 eggs, 1 cup of the cider, which tastes like regret, and press a coin into her hand. She blesses you and warns of wolves in the next valley. There haven't been wolves here in years, your squire says, after you ride off. You nod. That's what people say before wolves come back. Midday comes softly. The sun filters through green trees, dappling the road with gold. A breeze picks up, stirring the new leaves, and for a while, the world feels almost clean. You eat lunch beside a brook, bread, cheese, and a few of the overpacked apples your squire insisted on bringing. He talks about wanting to train with the Baron's men someday. He asks what it was like, your first real battle. You answer truthfully. Loud, fast, confusing, and afterward, everything smelled like iron. He's quiet after that. You arrive at Brayford Crossing by late afternoon. It's not much, a wide bend in the river, a ferry made from a flat-bottomed barge, a wooden toll house on the southern bank, and a muddy road leading northward toward 2 manors that don't particularly like each other. Lord Howrick of Braidmere claims the crossing is his by ancestral right. Lady Isbeth of Fenford says her family built the first ferry here, and that Howrick only inherited a fence. Both have posted guards. Neither has blinked in a week. You're met at the riverbank by a red-faced man with ink-stained fingers and a badge of office pinned sideways to his collar. He introduces himself as Jaron, the bailiff of Brayford. They're both waiting, sir, he says, pointing first to the hill above the toll house, where Howrick's banner, silver antlers on green, waves lazily in the breeze. And there, he gestures to the opposite hill, is Fenford's camp. You can just make out Lady Isbeth's sigil, a white horse with a golden eye. You sigh. Anyone been stabbed yet? Not yet, Jaron says. Just 2 chickens thrown, and a loaf of very stale bread. You nod. You've seen worse. You cross the ferry on foot. The barge groans with every step. The river moves lazily below, wide and brown, carrying leaves and the occasional startled frog downstream. On the other side, Lady Isbeth greets you personally. She's older than you expected, sharp-eyed, white-haired, and dressed in riding leathers. She carries herself like someone who has been obeyed more often than questioned. I'm told you listen before speaking, she says. A rare trait. I appreciate that. You thank her. She hands you a scroll, a deed, she says, proving her family's rights to the ferry. You scan it. The ink is old, the handwriting beautiful, and at least 2 of the names listed are saints. Then you ride uphill to Howrick's camp. He meets you in full armor, a show of force. His beard is trimmed too sharply, his eyes too quick. He smiles the way a knife might smile if it could. My claim is simple, he says. The land on this bank is mine. The road is mine. The river, therefore, belongs to me. You ask for his documents. He produces 3, none older than 15 years. 2 are sealed by a cousin. The 3rd is signed by someone who died last winter. You don't react, because here's your historical fact of the day. Rivers, ferries, and bridges were among the most contested pieces of infrastructure in the medieval world. Whoever controlled the crossing controlled the tolls, and whoever controlled the tolls didn't need as many sheep. You spend the evening reviewing maps, talking with Jaron, inspecting the ferry, and examining the posts on either side. Both families have altered the land over generations. There is no clear answer, but there is a way forward. The next morning, you call both parties to the ferry at dawn. They arrive reluctantly, banners trailing behind them like wounded birds. You stand on the middle of the barge, and you speak. You propose that the ferry be held in joint stewardship, that neither party may post toll men without mutual consent, that revenue be split with seasonal reviews, that in times of war, whoever provides soldiers to defend the crossing shall hold it temporarily. Both protest, loudly, but neither leaves, which means they're listening. Eventually, Howrick spits into the river and mutters, "Fine." Isbeth raises one eyebrow, conditional on written agreement. You promise parchment by sundown. They shake hands. It is the ugliest handshake you've ever seen, but it holds. You ride away as the morning sun warms your back. Your squire is quiet, thoughtful. Did we win? he finally asks. You consider that. No one bled. You say. No one lost. He nods. Later, back on the road, you find a snail carved into a fallen log. You stop. You smile. And you realize, for all its silence and weight, this life still offers moments like this. Small, absurd, and perfectly your own. The road back is quieter than the journey out. You leave Brayford Crossing with no fanfare, no trumpets, and certainly no grateful townspeople waving garlands of thanks. Just a folded parchment in your satchel, 2 signatures and 1 official seal. Proof of peace forged not through battle, but through stubbornness, compromise, and a refusal to let a ferry be the cause of another pointless feud. You and your squire ride slowly, partly to avoid the deeper puddles left by last night's rain, mostly because your legs are still punishing you for sleeping in a chair shaped more like a question mark than a piece of furniture. The hills are damp with morning mist, curling over the trees like a shawl someone forgot to fold properly. Birds flit between branches. The world smells of earth, green things, and distant livestock. You find yourself humming under your breath, a tune you don't recognize until your squire joins in. It's the song from the puppet show, the one about the fox who stole the abbess's ring and married a chicken. You both stop at the same time. No more singing. You agree silently. You pass the shrine to St. Lorne again. Someone has left a coin and a sprig of rosemary. You nod as you go by, not because you're superstitious, though maybe you are, but because it costs nothing to respect old spirits. By midday, you reach a village on the southern edge of the barony. You decide to stop, not because you're tired, but because you're beginning to recognize a certain emptiness behind your squire's cheerful eyes, the kind that only stew, dry socks, and a bench can cure. The inn is simple. 1 room for both of you, beds made from rope and wool, and a dining hall filled with smoke, dogs, and local gossip. You love it immediately. The innkeeper is a woman named Hild, broad-shouldered and quick-witted. She recognizes your seal and bows. Not deeply, not reverently, but with the practiced half-nod of someone who's seen nobility and cleaned up after it. She serves stew, actual stew, not pottage, filled with carrots, barley, and a surprising amount of identifiable meat. Your squire eats like someone who suspects the bowl might vanish if he doesn't finish it quickly. Across the hall, a minstrel is tuning a lute. You brace for a song. Instead, he recites a poem, quiet, melancholy, about a knight who went looking for dragons, but found only his own shadow. You stare at your spoon for a while after that. Here's your historical fact of the day. Many knights in the high Middle Ages never saw true battle. Some trained all their lives and died of illness. Others managed estates until they were old and round, and only put on armor for paintings or funerals. The idea of constant combat was more song than truth. And truth, you've come to learn, is usually smaller than we expect. Less sword, more scroll. After the meal, your squire explores the village. He returns with a carved wooden whistle and the wide-eyed wonder of someone who traded 2 buttons for a dragon-shaped flute. You decide not to ask questions. You rest. For real. Not just physically, but that rare, aching kind of rest that comes when no one expects anything from you for a few hours. You stretch out on the rope bed and let your eyes drift toward the rafters. You wonder how many nights like this the road will offer. You wonder how many you'll remember. Evening settles like an old cloak, soft, familiar, a little threadbare at the edges. The fire in the inn's hearth crackles low. Hild brings a second round of ale, along with bread that tastes faintly of rosemary and something sweet you can't quite name. You share it with your squire. Neither of you speak for a long time. Finally, he breaks the silence. What do we do when we get back? You look at him. The fire dances in his eyes. You answer slowly. We feed the chickens. We count sacks of barley. We settle an argument about whose cow wandered into the cabbage plot. He frowns. That's it. That's everything, you say, because it is. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. In parts of medieval England, it was believed that if a knight failed to oversee his land fairly, his ghost would be cursed to wander the manor grounds at night, not as punishment for war, but for letting the fields go untended, not judging the bean festival fairly. not helping a tenant marry without proper witness, not being present. You stare into the fire. Your boots dry beside it. Your sword is on the table, still dusty from the road. Your hands rest on your lap, calloused, rough, not from battle but from everything else. And you realize something. You do not miss the council, not even a little. The next morning, the village gives you a quiet send-off. A child waves a stick at you like it's a sword. The village priest offers you a hard biscuit and a slightly confused blessing. Hild presses a jar of pickled beets into your hands and says, "In case the road offers nothing better." You thank her. You mean it. The road back toward your manor is longer than it was on the way out. Not physically, just emotionally. You feel the weight of what awaits: ledgers, missing hens, the Reeves' long-winded updates, and the Thatcher's widow, who is still not over losing her best shovel. But also, your orchard, the foal, the tapestry in your hall that you still think is upside down. You ride in silence for a long time. The trees stretch overhead like archways. The breeze is warm. There are bees. You stop once to let Stephen drink at a brook. Your squire takes out his carved dragon whistle and plays 2 squeaky notes. You wince. "Still learning," he says. You nod. So are we all. You ride. The manor rises on the horizon. The chimneys smoke. The banner still flaps, faded but proud. And as you approach, the villagers begin to emerge. Not to cheer, not to greet, just to look, to see. Because you're back. Because you returned. Because that, more than any battle, is what makes a knight. Not what you conquer, but what you come home to. And what comes home with you. Home greets you not with trumpets, but with a broken fence. You notice it before you even dismount. One of the east pasture gates is hanging off its hinge, leaning like a drunk noble after the 3rd course of wine. A sheep, only one, but already looking guilty, is standing halfway through the gap, chewing a mouthful of something that is definitely not grass. You sigh. You are not yet off the horse, and already the estate has begun whispering its usual list of needs. Mend me, count me, argue over me. Your squire swings down first, all energy and boot clatter. He runs toward the barn with the enthusiasm of a boy who's missed familiar hay. You follow, a touch slower, knees protesting as you dismount and stretch with the pained dignity of a knight who spent far too much time sitting. A stable hand appears, a boy you don't recognize, and reaches for Stephen's reins with shaking fingers. You smile gently, to put him at ease. Stephen immediately bites at the boy's sleeve. You mutter a quiet apology and hand the horse over with a pat on the neck. The manor yard looks about the same. Chickens underfoot, a cat sunning itself in your armor pile, and 3 village children attempting to teach a goat how to curtsy. You nod. Everything's exactly where it should be. The steward appears before you even reach the hall. He looks tired, but relieved. You recognize the signs. He's had to mediate 3 disputes, organize repairs, and probably prevent the Thatcher from burning down his own shed, all without your help. He's earned your respect, maybe even a rest day, but not today. "Welcome home, my lord," he says. You raise a hand. "Anything urgent?" He blinks. "Define urgent." You both laugh, weakly. Inside the manor hall, it smells of firewood, onions, and beeswax polish. Someone cleaned while you were gone. The long table has been cleared of old records, the floor swept, the hearth restacked. The tapestry on the far wall, still upside down, flutters slightly in the breeze from the open window. You take a breath, a real one, deep, from the bottom of your ribs. You didn't realize how shallow your breathing had been until just now. The steward begins his report. 3 fences broken. 2 pigs escaped again. The Northfield's plow blade has snapped. The priest insists the chapel needs a new roof, though you suspect that's just an excuse to stop squirrels falling through during Mass. A traveling musician refused to pay toll at the river and was pelted with turnips by local children. You listen. You nod. You take it all in. And you feel whole. Here's your historical fact of the day. Knights were often more administrators than warriors. They were judges, landlords, field planners, and dispute resolvers. They knew the grain count better than their own bloodlines. They were expected to bring justice with the same hand that held a sword. By sunset, you've already mediated two arguments. The first, a pig wandered into someone's yard and ate half a turnip cake left cooling on the window ledge. The second, the Reeves' son claims someone borrowed his best walking stick without permission, which, upon investigation, turns out to be a slightly straight tree branch with a bit of ribbon tied around it. You award him a new one anyway, if only to stop the sulking. Your squire finds you later in the orchard. He's brushing the foal, who, to everyone's surprise, is still present and has not attempted escape since your return. I think he's calming down, your squire says. You nod, or plotting something worse. You take the brush from him and finish the job yourself. Slow strokes down the animal's flank. The foal leans into it, gentle, familiar. You realize, absently, that no sword fight you've been in ever gave you the kind of peace this moment does. As twilight rolls in, you walk the village road one more time. The homes are quiet, the gardens tended. A group of elders sits near the well, passing a jug of cider and arguing about the weather 3 summers ago. You wave. They nod. One gestures with a cup, as if to say, "Still here, aren't we?" "Yes, you are." You pass the chapel. The priest stands at the door, humming a hymn you only half remember. You ask about the roof. He sighs and says, "One of the squirrels gave birth during Vespers." You nod solemnly. "I'll see what I can do." You return to the manor just as the first stars begin peeking through the violet sky. The hall is quiet, the fire low. Your boots leave faint prints on the swept floor. You sit by the hearth. Your sword hangs on its usual peg, not polished, not ceremonial, just there, waiting, watching. Your ledger rests on the table, still open, still unfinished. You light a candle and begin a new page. Returned from Brayford, dispute settled, no blood, no fire, river still flowing, 3 pigs missing, 1 returned, possibly fatter than before. Council concluded, opinions unchanged. Bread was adequate. You pause. Ed, I am tired, but not unhappy. Your squire enters a moment later, holding a small pot of honey. The beekeeper wanted to say thank you, he says. You look at the jar. It glows in the candlelight. Simple, pure, earned. You dip a finger in. Taste, sweet, and then you sit back. Let the warmth of the fire sink in. Let the day fall away. And you realize, there is no song for what you do. No epic tale for fence repairs, turnip disputes, or fairy negotiations. But there is life, and it is enough, and it is yours. The next morning arrives with birdsong and a small rock being thrown at your window. You ignore the birdsong. The rock, however, is harder to dismiss. It taps the wooden shutter once, then again, then a third time with the persistence of someone who thinks urgent, applies to every task that crosses their desk, including whether a new hay cart needs 2 wheels or 4. You rise slowly, as always. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is cool stone, which somehow feels colder than the air itself. You blink at the light pressing through the shutter slats and debate the likelihood of staying in bed for just 1 more hour. But you know better. You open the shutter. Your squire is standing below with a sheepish expression and a slightly crooked helmet perched on his head. There's someone at the gate, he says, and he's armored. You squint. Armored. Yes. Properly. Polished. Feathers. The works. You groan. You were hoping to spend this day visiting the orchard, writing in the ledger, or maybe finally sorting through the 27 scrolls you brought back from council, most of which seem to say the same thing in slightly different Latin. But no. Feathers. Polished armor. A visitor. You wash quickly, dress faster, and descend the stairs with your belt half fastened. In the hall, the steward hands you a cup of watered wine and says, he claims to be Sir Bowdry of Ellenmarsh. You blink. Slowly. That name means something. Ah, yes. Sir Bowdry. An old acquaintance from your tournament days. All flourish and no follow-through. The kind of knight who names his horse after a Greek god and his sword after a woman he's never met. He once lost a joust by tipping himself off his own saddle before anyone touched him. You sigh. This will not be a short visit. You step outside, and there he is, Sir Bowdry, in all his resplendent, overly enthusiastic glory. His armor is spotless. His plume is red and absurdly tall. His face, as always, is tan in that way that suggests expensive oils and a great deal of intentional sunbathing. "My noble friend," he bellows, spreading his arms. You don't get to speak. He embraces you, metal creaking against your ribs, and releases you only when your squire clears his throat too loudly. "I bring news," Bowdry declares, "and opportunity. You're already tired. Over breakfast, which Bowdry insists be held in the orchard for dramatic effect, he explains that he's forming a questing company, a band of noble knights to patrol the realm, settle wrongs, and possibly defeat a bandit king who may or may not exist. You chew your bread slowly. He shows you a scroll, rolled and sealed. It's a royal endorsement, though you notice the ink is faded and the date is last season. You're not entirely sure it's still valid. Still, you let him speak, because that's what you do. "Imagine it," he says. "You, me, the open road, righting wrongs, defending widows, scaring tax collectors." You raise an eyebrow. "We are the tax collectors." He waves a hand. Details. You try to change the subject. You ask about his family estate. He admits, rather quickly, that it was recently seized due to an accounting error. You suspect that means gambling, or backing the wrong horse, literally or politically. He insists he has new investors. You ask if one of them is real. He changes the subject to armor polish. Eventually, your steward comes to your rescue. "There's a messenger from Fenford, sir." You rise with more enthusiasm than politeness. "Bowdry," you say. "You are always welcome, but the estate calls." He clasps your forearm dramatically. "Think on it. I shall remain 2 days. Then I ride." You don't ask where. You return to the hall. The messenger from Fenford is waiting, hat in hand, boots muddy, eyes nervous. He gives you a sealed letter, Lady Ispit's sigil pressed in green wax. You break the seal. It's brief. There's been an incident. Apparently, Lord Howrick's men were spotted grazing cattle too close to the shared ferry landing. There was shouting. No blood, but several threats. And one thrown boot. You pinch the bridge of your nose. Peace, it seems, is not a permanent condition, more of a seasonal one. You write a reply by candlelight, requesting calm, proposing a second meeting, and including 2 terrible puns you know Ispit will appreciate. Later, as the sun sets and the manor quiets again, you wander to the backfield. The wind is soft. The foal, still miraculously unescaped, flicks his ears as you pass. A few children chase a hoop down the village lane. A dog barks. Somewhere in the woods, an owl complains about the noise. You sit on the old bench beside the well, the same one that creaks when it's too humid and leans to the left in winter. And here's your historical fact of the day. Many knights, despite the romantic imagery, spent most of their days adjusting. Not fighting, not questing, but adjusting to floods, to borders, to new taxes, to nobles with too much ambition and too little sense. You watch the sky. The stars begin to show. A quiet one here, a bold one there. You wonder if Bowdry will truly leave in 2 days, or if he'll find an excuse to stay, until his debts catch up or his ego finds something else to ride. You wonder if Fenford and Braidmere will ever share a ferry without a weekly insult. You wonder, quietly, how long you've been doing this. And then your squire appears, dragging a crate. He sits beside you, says nothing, hands you an apple. You both eat in silence. The night deepens, and for a moment nothing breaks. No armor, no fences, no treaties. Just quiet, just stars, just home. The morning begins with a funeral. Not yours, thankfully, although the way your knees feel as you bend to lace your boots suggests otherwise. It's old Martin, the cooper, finally passed after 3 full weeks of coughing like a bagpipe with a grudge. He was 80, maybe 90, maybe immortal until last night. No one really knew. Martin outlived 3 wives, 4 horses, and a thunderstorm that split the chapel roof. He once claimed he only stayed alive to finish one last barrel, and then never got around to it. You dress in black, not armor, just your long cloak with the least amount of mended holes, and walk down to the chapel with the rest of the village. The path is muddy, worn. It's the kind of morning that weighs on your boots and on your bones. Low sky, soft mist, and the smell of turned earth. The grave is already dug. The coffin, simple pine, nailed by hand, is resting beside it. 2 chickens wander too close and are gently shooed away by the priest, who mumbles a blessing and adjusts his wet sleeves. The service is short, spoken in half Latin, half village dialect, and entirely soaked with sincerity. The wind carries every word sideways. You don't catch much of it, but you hear your own name in there, once or twice. It makes you blink. The priest nods to you, and so you step forward, because you are the knight. Because when the villagers need someone to speak for the dead, they don't ask the reeve, or the steward, or the priest. They ask you. You clear your throat. You say something about Martin's barrels, how they held wine, beer, water, secrets. How one of them once held your sword after a fall from a horse you refused to admit was too fast for you. The villagers laugh. Softly, you speak about how Martin never asked for much, just warmth and wood and time. You speak of the way his fingers curled like tree roots, how he would hum as he worked, and how his cough was louder than the bell on St. Havrick's feast day. You end with a promise to finish his last barrel. You have no idea how, but it feels right. Then the coffin is lowered, the dirt returned, the crowd thins, like fog lifting, and the world continues. Here's your historical fact of the day. Knights were often expected to preside over more than just war. They were guardians of custom, faith, and community rhythm. A village funeral, a feast, a wedding. These were under your watch, not for glory, but because someone had to remember. You stay behind after the others leave. Just you, the damp grass, and the smell of fresh earth. Your squire returns with your cloak, now soaked from the waist down. I told you not to kneel in that spot, he says, trying to sound annoyed. You shrug. It was the best view. He rolls his eyes. Together, you walk back. The manor seems quieter now, as if it too knows someone is missing. In the hall, you find a bucket of rainwater near the door and a scroll tied with rough twine waiting on your table. It's from the Baron. Another request. Another village dispute. Another journey? No, not this time. You write a reply, politely declining. You offer the name of Sir Beric, young, zealous, and still eager to impress. Let him sort out the argument about grazing rights and acorn theft. You have barrels to finish, and a funeral to honor. You spend the afternoon in Martin's old shed. It smells like smoke, oak, and dust so thick it settles in your sleeves. The tools are still there, chisel, mallet, the hoop-stretching iron that no one knows how to use properly. You pick up a half-finished barrel, run your hand across the staves, and begin to learn. Your squire joins you, sits quietly. Eventually he asks, "Is this night work?" You consider the question. "Yes," you say. "This too." He watches for a long time, then picks up a chisel. Outside, the rain starts again. Soft, rhythmic, like a lullaby for the living. And you work, not for glory, not for battle, but for memory, for the things we leave behind, for the people who carried us when no one else saw, for Martin, and the barrel that waited. By the time the barrel is done, your hands are raw, not bleeding, not blistered, just used. Every finger coated in dust and splinters, every joint aching in quiet protest. The way a body complains not in screams, but in whispers. Slow down. You're not 20 anymore. That stave isn't going to fit no matter how you tilt it. But it does eventually, because you tilt it again, and again, and again, until the wood relents, until the shape holds, until, by some quiet miracle of geometry and muscle memory and sheer patience, a ring of nothing becomes a vessel, a barrel, Martin's last. It sits on the workbench now, solid, smooth, bound by 2 iron hoops and a final silent wish. Your squire runs a cloth over it with reverence, like he's polishing a tombstone. He doesn't speak. You don't either. Not yet. Instead, You light the lantern hanging from the shed's crooked beam. The light flickers across the wood, golden and forgiving. You pour a ladle of water inside, just to see. It holds. No leaks. It sighs. Or maybe you do. The wind stirs through the orchard outside. The kind of breeze that feels like memory and smells like smoke and apple bark. You rest your elbows on the bench, stare at the wood grain, and think about the weight of things. Swords, scrolls, promises, barrels. And the ones that never get named. You glance at your squire. Did Martin ever teach you? He shakes his head. He tried, but I broke more than I made. You smile. That means you were learning. Here's your historical fact of the day. Many medieval knights had working knowledge of trades, out of necessity. A sword was fine, but knowing how to mend a plow, repair a door, or build a barrel made you far more valuable to your manor than 5 hours on horseback in peacetime. You carry the barrel to the hall yourself. The steward offers to help, but you shake your head. You place it by the hearth, where Martin used to sit during feasts and mutter about how the ale tasted better in his barrels. You pour the first drink into it that night. Warm cider, with a touch of honey and clove. The scent carries across the room. The villagers lift their cups. No toast, just a quiet nod, and a new place for cider to rest. Later, after the hall has emptied and the flames have burned low, you sit with your squire and the steward, dividing up duties for the week ahead. The steward reports that the chapel roof has been patched with leftover shingles from the mill. The squirrels have moved to the belfry and seem to be enjoying the acoustics. There's also talk of a fox troubling the chicken coop. You nod. You'll investigate. Again. The orchard fence needs mending. You nod again. The Baron's messenger is expected in 5 days. This time you sigh. Is it another request? Your squire asks. You glance at the parchment. No. A feast. Midsummer's. He brightens. Will there be music? You nod. And dancing. And confusion. He beams. But you also know what it means. More preparation. More logistics. More of what people don't sing about when they tell tales of knights. The steward suggests you ask the village weaver to dye new banners. Your old ones are fading. You glance up. He's right. The fox on your house crest has lost its face entirely. It now looks like a confused dog holding a stick. You agree. A new banner. Why not? The next day, you visit the weaver's cottage, a little stone hut covered in ivy, with blue wool drying in the breeze, and a cat perched like a crown on the thatched roof. Her name is Ada, and she greets you with a stern nod and a swifter tongue. You want a banner? You're late, she says before you've even opened your mouth. Everyone wants banners now. The Baron, the monks, even that fishmonger from Den's Fold. He wants one with a crab on fire. You raise an eyebrow. Why? She shrugs. Says it's memorable. You manage a chuckle. Mine's just a fox. She peers at you. Still upright. Mostly. She grins. Good. I'll have it ready in 2 weeks. Red. You nod. Red. Back at the manor, your squire is attempting to train the foal. Or, more precisely, he is attempting to convince the foal that a blanket is not a predator. The foal disagrees. You watch for a moment, amused, until the blanket ends up in a tree. You leave him to it. Instead, you check the orchard wall. The southern edge has started to sink again. Too much rain. Too many roots pushing from underneath. You kneel beside the stones and begin pulling at the loose ones, resetting them one by one. It's slow work. Mundane. Necessary. Your hands are soon covered in dirt. Your knees ache. A worm crawls over your thumb. But the wall takes shape again, stone by stone. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some knights kept small personal journals, not of battles, but of repairs. A stone replaced, a foal born, a tax forgiven. These notes were not for show. They were for memory, a ledger of life, not war. You wonder, for a moment, if any of those journals survived. You hope so. You return inside at dusk. The hall is warm. The cider barrel gleams. You sit with your squire beside the fire. He has a book this time, an old one, filled with poems. He reads aloud, fumbling over the rhymes. You don't correct him. You listen. You remember. You rest. And as the fire crackles low and the stars appear again outside the high window, you realize you are no longer waiting for adventure. You are within one, and you are building it. One fence, one feast, one barrel at a time. You wait before dawn again, not because you must, but because the manor is whispering, not in words exactly, but in the creak of wood under weight that hasn't shifted in a week, in the cool brush of wind that slides across your face through a half-latched shutter, in the faint rustling of something alive in the eaves. You rise and listen. Properly. There it is. A shuffle near the granary. A distant thump. And then, yes, a low clang, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone trying very hard not to be caught. You don't bother with boots. Just your cloak, your knife, and the quiet confidence of a man who knows every floorboard in his hall and every patch of uneven ground between here and the barley barn. You pass the fire still smoldering in the hearth, your squire snoring on a wool mat with a half-eaten apple in his hand. You pause. Take the apple. Take a bite. Too soft. Leave the rest on the table. Outside, the world is barely formed. Morning mist curls around the orchard trees like shy ghosts. The manor yard is still dark, save for the faintest glow where the embers of the night's watch fire have settled into ash. You circle the granary with careful steps and find her, a child barefoot, shivering, one hand gripping the latch of your oat bin like it's the only solid thing in her world. She's no older than 10. Her dress is threadbare, her cheeks streaked with soot or mud or both. A basket lies beside her, empty except for a single onion and something wrapped in cloth. Probably bread, probably stolen. She sees you, freezes, and here it is, that moment, where legend would have you shout, draw steel, deliver justice. But you are not a legend. You are tired, barefoot, and holding half a bad apple. You say softly, hungry. She nods once. You step aside. Come in. You'll eat. She hesitates, then bolts, not into the woods, but into the manor. You smile. That's a good sign. Your squire wakes with a start when the child runs past him. You follow behind, barefoot, cloak flapping, looking, perhaps, not very knightly. He opens his mouth to ask. You hold up a hand. Bread. Warm it. Quietly. He stares, then obeys. The girl stands at the hearth now, hands out toward the fading heat. She doesn't speak. You don't ask her name. You just place a small loaf and a bit of cheese on the table and step back. She eats fast, like she's still expecting someone to stop her. When she finishes, she finally speaks. My brother's sick. You nod. Wait. In the woods, she adds. We didn't mean to stay. We just didn't leave. You ask where. She tells you. You grab your boots. Within the hour, you're on horseback with your squire, the girl perched between you, arms wrapped tight. You ride northeast through the thickets behind the abandoned tannery, past the edge of your land, into the dense patch of woods that once belonged to no one and now belongs to whoever's desperate enough to claim it. You find them in a hollow. A boy, maybe 12, curled under an old canvas stretched between branches, pale feverish, eyes unfocused. His breathing is shallow, his lips cracked. Your squire drops to his knees, checks the boy's pulse, then looks up at you with that rare flash of grown-up seriousness he's only just started to wear. He needs warmth and broth. You nod, and you carry the boy yourself, back through the forest, back over the muddy fields, back to your hall, where the cook nearly drops her ladle when she sees what you've brought in. They find space for him by the hearth. The girl refuses to leave his side. Your steward appears, face grim. They're squatters, he says. You nod. Not today. He watches you, says nothing more. Later, after the boy's fever has eased and the girl is asleep beside him, curled on your old cloak, your squire asks what will happen to them. You answer slowly. They'll stay. For now. They'll eat. If he recovers, maybe we find him work. If not, you trail off. They'll still stay. Until they don't need to. And here's your historical fact of the day. Medieval knights were often patrons of the vulnerable. Not always by choice, but because no one else could. No crown saw a peasant die. No scribe recorded a child's hunger. But the knight saw, and chose. Or didn't. You chose. That night, you return to the barrel. You tap it once. Pour a cup. Sip. It tastes better now. Fuller. Maybe it's the cider. Maybe it's something else. You pass a cup to your squire. He sniffs. Is this allowed? You smile. Let's say it's for morale. Outside, the wind shifts. The manor is still. And inside, two children sleep safely for the first time in who knows how long. No trumpets mark the victory, but you feel it, deep in your chest. A kind of armor no forge could shape. And you understand, the smallest things you guard are the things that make you a knight. The next morning, the manor smells like broth. Not pottage, not burnt oatcakes. Broth, with herbs. Real ones, wild garlic, sage. A few green strands of something you can't name, but trust entirely, because the cook muttered. Martin would have approved, as she tossed it into the pot. You wake not to the sound of roosters or the clatter of buckets, but to the soft hum of someone singing. Not a servant, not your squire. It's the girl, the barefoot thief turned unexpected guest, sitting cross-legged by the hearth, humming a lullaby in a dialect that stumbles on the words, but keeps perfect tune. Her brother sleeps beside her, bundled in wool and dreams, his breath steadier now. The fever broke in the early hours, thanks to rest, soup, and the good fortune of being caught by a knight with more patience than protocol. You don't interrupt. You just watch from the shadows of the hall until your squire joins you, rubbing his eyes, hair pointed in 6 directions. He yawns. Are we keeping them then? He mumbles. You nod. For now. He stares a moment longer, then nods too, as if to say, fair enough. Later, over breakfast, which includes fresh bread, boiled eggs, and a wedge of blue-veined cheese that smells like something you should apologize for, you begin reviewing the week's tasks. The steward presents a list, and it is, as usual, both impressive and unreasonable. 2 field walls have collapsed after the storm. The southern bridge has lost 3 planks. The reeve suspects the miller is undermeasuring grain again. The village wants permission to build a second oven. You skim the parchment. You sip your ale. You sigh deeply. Your squire, ever helpful, offers to handle the oven petition. You agree, provided he doesn't set anything on fire. The children eat at the far end of the table now, watched over by the cook with her best grandmotherly scowl. The girl eats slowly, the boy cautiously. You make sure no one rushes them. You've seen what happens when hunger becomes habit. After breakfast, you walk the estate, because that is what you do. First, the orchard. The apples are early this year, blossoms turning faster than usual. The bees seem pleased. You nod to the hives. No response. Bees are famously aloof. Next, the southern bridge. It's worse than you expected. 3 planks missing, 1 support beam sagging like an overworked noble. Your squire points at it and says, "That looks like my back after sparring." You agree. Quietly. You mark the repairs. Timber will need to be cut. Labor's pulled from barley work. It's not ideal, but if the bridge goes down, the cart route doubles in length. You've learned by now. Inconvenience breeds argument, and argument breeds nonsense. On the way back, you stop by the chapel. The priest waves from the roof. He's holding a squirrel in one hand and a piece of bread in the other. You pretend not to see. You return to the manor by midday, just in time to hear shouting from the courtyard. You hurry. It's Sir Bowdry, still here, still shining, and now arguing with your blacksmith over saddle buckle. I said it was ornamental. Bowdry insists, pointing at a twisted piece of bronze shaped like a lion with wings. It's useless. The blacksmith replies flatly. Broke off when you looked at it too hard. Bowdry spots you, smiles broadly. Ah, my brother in arms. Good news. You brace yourself. I found our first quest. You glance around. We have a quest. He beams. Indeed, a merchant in Densfold claims to have seen a 3-headed hound in the woods, guarding a pile of silver. You stare. You mean a wild dog near a misplaced cart. He shrugs. Details. You decline. Again. He pretends to pout. Again. Then he rides off toward the stables, calling for his squire, his armor, and something called the glorious banner of reprisal. You decide not to ask. Your steward watches him go. Why does he keep coming back, he asks. You think, then say, because here someone listens. That afternoon, you return to the hall. The boy is awake now, quiet, still pale, but breathing stronger. The girl sits beside him, carving something into a stick. You peek over her shoulder. It's a fox. Not bad. You ask her name. Emile, she says. You ask his. Tom. You nod. You tell them they can stay until Tom is well, that there's always work if they want it, and always food if they need it. She asks why. You pause. Because you remember a time when someone let you stay, and you never forgot. But all you say is, because you're here. Here's your historical fact of the day. Many manorial knights, contrary to popular image, served as social anchors. They were not just military figures, but stability. In a world of shifting borders, plagues, and fires, the knight was a pillar, not because of the sword on his hip, but the roof he kept over his people's heads. That night, you walk the orchard again. The wind is warm. The stars are generous. Your squire catches up, humming the puppet song again, off-key and unrepentant. He hands you something, a wooden carving, the fox Emile made. You smile, put it on the hall table. You say, right by the ledger. You return to the manor with tired feet and a full chest. You pass the cider barrel. You pour 2 cups, one for you, one for Martin. The fire crackles. The children sleep. And somewhere outside, the trees bend in the breeze like they're bowing to the life you've built. Not grand, not sung about, not perfect, but yours, and still growing. You wait to thunder, but not the sky-splitting kind that comes with rain and lightning. No, this thunder has hooves, dozens of them, fast, loud, closing in. You're halfway into your tunic before you realize the noise isn't a cavalry charge or an invasion or even Sir Bowdry's latest attempt at staging a heroic departure. It's the harvest team, returning early from the West Field. And they're not just trotting, they're racing. You move to the window. At least 5 carts are bouncing into the manor yard, overloaded with sacks, sheaves, and shouting. A few chickens flee in protest. The steward is already outside, robe flapping like a banner in the wind, trying to direct the chaos with a stick and the tone of someone who has seen this exact problem 14 times before and still hasn't found a polite way to scream. Your squire is still asleep, sprawled across a bench with a piece of bread clutched like a weapon. You jab him in the ribs with the toe of your boot. He flails, mumbles something about rogue turnips, and stumbles to his feet. Downstairs, the air is thick with motion, boots stomping, wheels creaking, sacks thumping onto tables. Someone's already started sorting grain in the corner. You grab your cloak and stride into the yard, where the reeve is doing his best impression of a man in control. What happened, you ask? Storm, he grunts, tugging a sack off a cart. The fields to the west, clouds rolled in fast. Wind flattened half the barley. We got what we could. Might lose the rest. You glance at the sky. Still clear here. Still blue. But in the distance, beyond the orchard, you see it. A wall of gray rising on the horizon. Thick and slow and inevitable. All right, you say. Everyone inside. Double sort. Check for rot. Move the tools into the stable. And the hay, asks the reeve. Up top, if there's still space. You issue the orders not loudly, not with bravado, but with the calm, clipped tone of someone who has no time for panic. And the villagers respond, not because they fear you, but because they trust you, because you've been in the mud with them, because they've seen you repair the same fence 3 times with your own hands. As the storm approaches, you take your place in the center of it all, not as a commander, but as a node, a fulcrum, a familiar, steady thing. Here's your historical fact of the day. The knight in a rural manor was not just a symbol of protection in war, but a guarantor of rhythm in peace. When disaster threatened, be it weather, blight, or misfortune, the knight's task was continuity, to help the village remember itself when the world tried to scatter its pieces. You help unload the last of the wheat. Your shoulders ache. Your boots are soaked. You shout once, just once, at a squire trying to stack sacks too high. He blushes and restacks them, lower and safer. By mid-afternoon, the sky goes black, and the rain arrives. It doesn't fall, it slams. Thick, slanted sheets of water pelt the roof of the hall, rattle shutters, drench everything not already indoors. Thunder follows, not the gentle kind, but the kind that makes trees bow. You're inside by then, standing in the manor hall, surrounded by wet boots, muddy cloaks, steaming barrels, and the smell of smoke and barley. The children, Emile and Tom, sit near the hearth, eyes wide, huddled in borrowed cloaks. Emile is telling Tom that the storm is just the sky's way of cleaning itself. You pretend not to listen, but you smile. Your steward passes you a mug of warm cider. You take it, drink, nod thanks. Your squire sits beside you, half asleep but still alert enough to catch a falling ladle before it hits the floor. He grins, triumphant. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Outside, a bolt of lightning cracks close enough to shake the shutters. Someone screams. A dog barks. But inside your walls, your roof, there's only warmth, noise, and the occasional mild panic. You have built something that holds. That's no small thing. You spend the evening checking the grain. 2 sacks soaked, 3 still dry, 1 suspiciously missing. You make a note. You visit the stable. The foal is nervous, pacing. You calm him with your voice, a soft touch to the neck. He presses into you with the weight of trust. And hey, back in the hall, the children are asleep again. Tom curled up like a cat, Emile half wrapped in a blanket, one hand still resting on the handle of a wooden spoon. You watch them, quietly, and you realize, if there was ever a day to define what knighthood means, it wasn't on a battlefield. It was today. Rain, chaos, grain in peril, boots full of mud, and still, the roof held. The people gathered. The food was shared. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. In some villages, storms were believed to test the soul of a household. If your hearth stayed lit, your roof held, and no child cried in the dark, it was said your ancestors had blessed you, that you were still, in some way, worthy of your place. You don't know if you believe that, but you do know this. When thunder cracks again and the wind slams the shutters once more, no one screams this time. They just press in closer, and you sit taller, not to be proud, but because it's what's needed. You stay awake long after the others have gone to bed, firelight dancing across your ledger. You write in the margin. Storm came fast. Harvest rushed. Roof held. People fed. Squire caught a ladle. Very proud. And beneath that, still here, you close the book, pour the last of the cider, and let the rain sing you to sleep. The rain stops in the softest way possible, not with drama, but with a sigh. No sudden sunbeam, no clapping of clear skies, just less noise, the kind you only notice if you've been listening long enough. Drips become drops, then silence, and the silence, somehow, is louder than the storm. You wake with a stiff neck, still in the great hall, still in your chair, a blanket half draped across your knees. No doubt your squire's work. The fire has burned down to its bones. Gray ash, a few orange coals. The room is quiet, save for a faint creak in the rafters and the snore of someone in the corner. Possibly the steward, possibly a dog. You stretch. Slowly. Everything feels damp. Your cloak, your hair, your bones. Outside, the air smells like wet earth and pine sap. You step onto the threshold barefoot, just for a moment, to feel the ground. It's soft, spongy, alive. The manor has survived. No damage, no flooding, no missing livestock, unless you count a mysteriously absent goat, which you suspect never existed and is merely the cook's excuse for an empty stew pot. Your squire appears at your side, blinking blearily. Did we live? You nod. Mostly. He grins, teeth crooked, hair wild. He looks like someone who survived a siege and celebrated by falling into a pile of hay. Together, you inspect the grounds. The orchard is soaked but standing. The barley fields, flattened in places but salvageable. One chicken coop has collapsed, but the chickens themselves seem completely unfazed. clucking with that peculiar mix of indignation and smugness they've mastered over centuries. The children trail behind you, now fully part of the daily rhythm. Emile carries a bucket half her size. Tom leans on a stick like a tiny, dramatic shepherd. At one point, Emile asks, "Is it always like this?" You glance at her. Like what? She waves her arms vaguely. All of it. Storms, graying goats, nights with soggy boots. You smile. Yes, always. Especially the soggy boots. That afternoon, the sun finally breaks through. Not with fireworks, just a golden beam across the orchard wall, warm and quiet. You take it as an invitation. So, you declare a manor-wide airing out. Every door opened, every rug hung, every mattress dragged into the yard, cloaks over fences, spoons on windowsills, bread loaves basking like old men on a beach. The villagers join in, not because you asked them to, but because it feels right, necessary, healing. And just like that, the hall becomes a sun-dappled festival. Someone finds a drum. Someone else starts to sing badly, but with commitment. The steward draws the line at dancing on the tables. Barely. Even you find yourself laughing. Not the polite chuckle of a lord appeasing his tenants, but the real kind. The deep-bellied, eyes closed, shoulders shaking kind that makes the muscles in your face feel unused. Here's your historical fact of the day. Many rural medieval communities practiced sun blessing, or airing rituals after storms. Not always formal, not always religious, but a mix of practicality and celebration. A communal exhale. A shared belief that light must be invited back in, not just awaited. You spot Sir Bowdry at the far end of the yard. Somehow he's returned. Somehow his boots are dry. He's teaching Tom how to salute using a stick as a sword and a pie tin as a shield. You allow it. Just this once. Your squire walks beside you, squinting into the sunlight. "This is nice," he says. You nod. It won't last. Then we enjoy it faster. You laugh. Inside, the barrel is tapped again. Cider flows. The flavor's stronger now. Maybe from the wood, maybe from time, maybe from memory. You sit beneath the old banner, the one Ada finished last week. The fox, bold and bright, tail curled like a question mark, stitched in red so deep it feels like fire. And you remember Martin, and his barrel, and the storm, and the field you rebuilt, and the child you fed, and the fire that stayed lit. You close your eyes, for a moment, and it almost feels like prayer, not to a god with a crown or a name, but to the rhythm of things, to this strange, sacred beat. Gather, work, rest, repeat. You feel the warmth on your face. You let it stay. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some knights believed sunlight itself was a kind of divine favor, not for battle, but for balance. There are accounts of oaths made not under banners or before kings, but standing alone, in a field, face turned to the sky. No audience, no applause, just witness. You think about that as the feast begins. Not a formal one, just food shared, cider passed, music that wobbles between charming and chaotic. Tom sleeps under a bench. Emile carves her second fox. Your squire is trying, unsuccessfully, to juggle apples. And you sit, and you listen, and you let the warmth stay just a little longer. You don't plan tomorrow. Not tonight. Tonight, the storm has passed, and the matter breathes again. The next morning arrives dressed in gold. Sunlight spills through the east windows like a lazy guest invited to breakfast. It pools on the stone floors, streaks across the wooden beams, kisses the sleeping faces of your people. People you didn't expect to have. And yet here they are, woven into your days, like threads you can't unpick. There's a new kind of stillness in the manor now. Not the silence of waiting, or dread, or cold rain slapping the shutters, but the kind that follows fullness. Laughter echoing faintly through clean hallways. Boots left at doors. That barrel of cider, somehow lighter again. You rise early, not because of duty, but because the light calls to you. Outside, the grass sparkles with dew. The orchard hums with insects. Two birds are arguing over a worm near the wall that fell during the storm. You side with the bird that has more determination. Always bet on stubbornness. Your squire joins you eventually, yawning so wide his jaw clicks. He carries a broom and a sense of moral superiority. Both are unnecessary, but tolerated. Today, he says dramatically, we restore order. You nod solemnly. Today we remove the beetle from the flower and the flower from the boots. He salutes you with a broom, trips on the threshold, and disappears into the hall. Emile and Tom are already helping in the yard. Emile stacking firewood with a technique you suspect she invented just now. Tom directing her like a miniature steward with a stick and a serious expression. You let them be. Instead, you walk to the orchard. Not the front path, but the narrow trail that winds past the well and the crumbled corner of the old wall, where moss climbs up the stone like it's trying to remember its way home. The apples here are smaller, a little bruised, but sweeter than the ones the Baron boasts about in his grand feasts. These are not show fruit. These are survivor apples. You pick one, take a bite, crisp. You sit on the stone ledge by the well, eating slowly, watching as a squirrel decides whether your presence is threatening or just mildly disappointing. From here, you can see the whole manor. The main hall, the grain shed, the stables, the new banners dancing gently in the breeze. And just beyond, the forest you know by the sound of its trees. The glade where Tom and Emile first waited. The edge of your world. You think, for a moment, about leaving. Just for a day. Just to remember what it felt like to not know what came next. To feel the edge of something wild again. Not danger, just uncertainty. But your thoughts are interrupted by the sound of hooves. Not many, just one rider. You stand. The messenger wears the Baron's colors. Dusty boots, a travel-stained tunic, and that look of someone who has been repeating the same words to too many people in too many villages. You greet him with a nod. He hands you a sealed scroll. From the Baron. Invitation. You break the wax. It's not a command. Not quite. It's a summons to attend the midsummer gathering at the Baron's estate. 2 days of feasting games and reaffirming oaths of loyalty, which you've learned means standing still in a very hot room while nobles pretend they remember your name. You sigh. Politely. The messenger waits. Will you attend, my lord? You glance behind you. At the manor, the squire now trying to scrub the walls with a mop. Emile balancing 3 apples on a plank. Tom yelling something about goat conspiracies. You turn back. I'll consider it. The messenger nods. I'm to return by sunset. Of course he is. You walk the grounds again, scroll in hand, thinking. Do you need to go? No. But do you have to? Perhaps. The manor isn't just yours. It's part of something larger. And sometimes, to protect the quiet things, you must show your face among the loud ones. Let them remember you still exist. Still matter. Still watch. But leaving means planning. You spend the rest of the day doing just that. You assign the steward authority over the grain stores. He accepts this with a look of deep suspicion and mild pride. Your squire will oversee the animals, the fences, and Emile and Tom, who accept this news with a combined shrug and request for pie. You leave instructions for the cider. Do not overpour. Do not underpour. Do not attempt to infuse with berries. You remind your cook that if Sir Bowdry shows up asking for the glory roast, she is to send him to the pond and let him find his own glory. You pack nothing grand, just your travel cloak, a dagger, the ring your mother gave you, and the small carved fox Emile left beside your cup yesterday. That night, after the hall quiets and the moon settles over the orchard like a silver coin in the sky's palm, you sit one last time beside the barrel. Your squire joins you, holding 2 mugs. You'll be gone 3 days? You nod. If the roads are dry. He hesitates. And if they aren't? You glance out the window. If they aren't, you say, I'll send a squirrel in my place. He nods seriously. Better handwriting. You both laugh, soft and real. And then silence. The kind that says everything's been said. Here's your historical fact of the day. Some manor lords in the 13th century could go years without leaving their lands. Others made frequent appearances at regional courts to maintain alliances or argue land boundaries. But always, always with the quiet knowledge that home was not where you dressed up, but where you laid down your sword without fear. You finish your drink. You rise. Tomorrow you ride. But tonight, you are still home, and it is still whole. You leave just after dawn alone, not because no one offered to come with you. Your squire nearly begged for the excuse to polish his chain mail in public, but because sometimes you need the silence between hoofbeats, the rhythm of your horse's steps on dry dirt, the cool bite of morning air slicing across your cheeks as fog rises gently from the fields like a sleepy exhale from the land itself. The manor fades behind you with a kind of reluctant grace. You don't look back at first. You never do. But then, just past the rise near the boundary oak, you pause. Turn. There it is. You're home. Roof patched. Orchard full. Smoke curling from the chimney, like a promise. You smile to yourself. Keep breathing. You tell it silently. I'll be back soon. The road to the Baron's Hall is uneventful, almost aggressively so. A few traders pass, leading carts of wool and overripe pears. One donkey refuses to move, despite 3 adults offering everything from apples to a song in exchange for cooperation. You nod sympathetically and move on. The villages you pass wave politely. You see a boy practicing sword swings with a stick, and a girl laughing at him while holding a much sharper-looking broom. Life as ever unfolds. By mid-morning, you reach a fork in the road with no signpost. Typical. You dismount, examine the ground. 2 sets of wheel ruts, but only one with recent prints. You go left. A risk, but one born of experience. The other road is too clean. No mud, no mess. Clearly not used recently. You choose the Messier way every time. It pays off. By noon, the Baron's estate rises into view. A sprawl of towers and banners and people running everywhere with the urgency of servants who know nobility, have no concept of time. A guard stops you at the outer gate, then recognizes your crest and waves you through with a hurried bow. You offer a nod. No more. You're not here for pomp. You stable your horse, decline a groom, and brush her down yourself. It takes longer, but it centers you. Your fingers know this rhythm better than any courtly etiquette. Brush, pat, braid, breathe. When you finally enter the keep, the air changes. It's heavier here, more scented, less honest. Perfume clings to the tapestries. You're offered wine before you've even removed your gloves. You take water instead. The steward raises an eyebrow. You raise both of yours. The Baron greets you at the great hall entrance. He's wearing 3 rings on one hand and a smile that's a little too large. Ah, our knight of the barley fields, he booms, clasping your hand. Still alive, I see. Against all odds, you say dryly. He laughs. Good, good. Come, eat. Drink. Let the realm see its pillars still stand. The feast begins. You're seated between a lady who smells like lavender and keeps quoting poetry you suspect she's writing on the spot, and a merchant who wants you to invest in dried eel exports. You nod politely, eat slowly, and say little. Your mind is elsewhere. Your manor, your people, Tom and Emile, the orchard. You excuse yourself after the second course, under the pretense of checking on your horse. Instead, you walk the Baron's grounds. It's beautiful, yes, but it's curated. Too clean. The grass clipped short, the hedges too symmetrical, the orchard trees spaced like soldiers. Nothing here grows by accident. You wander to the edge of the gardens and find a bench beneath an old chestnut tree. It's crooked, imperfect. You sit gratefully. Here's your historical fact of the day. Many barons and lords of the high court lived in a different world from the landed knights beneath them. Their lives were dictated by politics, legacy, and the unspoken theater of appearances. But the knight, especially one with land, walked between those worlds, one boot in the mud, one foot in the hall. A translator of realities, a bridge. As the sun begins to fall, you're summoned, not by a horn or a trumpet, but by a child, a page, no older than Emile, who bows and stammers. The Baron requests your presence in the East Tower. You raise an eyebrow. Interesting. The East Tower is rarely used. Private. Less ceremony. More truth. You follow the boy up a spiral staircase, lined with worn rugs and dust-flecked candlelight. At the top, the Baron waits, not in robes, not in rings, but in a simple tunic, one hand resting on a map spread across a long oak table. "I didn't call you here for feasting," he says without turning. You nod. "I assumed." He gestures you closer. The map shows borders, fields, river bends, names, but not all familiar. "This valley," he says, pointing to a shaded area along the southern edge. "Rumors, bandits, raids, disappearances. You study it. Not mine. Yet close," he says. "Too close. You understand. He doesn't need swords. He needs eyes. A man who walks quietly, sees clearly, and speaks little." You tap the map. "I'll ride there after I return." He nods. "Good. I trust your judgment." A rare sentence, spoken plainly. You both stand in silence, watching the map as if it might change itself. And here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some knights kept personal maps with charcoal notes and secret markings, tiny excess where something felt wrong, strange curls beside a cottage known for odd sounds. The world was not made of war alone. It was made of watching, of noticing, of returning to see if something still stood. You descend the tower in darkness, back through the glittering halls, past the music, the clinking goblets, the false smiles. You find your bed, but sleep takes its time, not because of fear, but because you are thinking of your road home, and what might wait beside it, and the old oak tree near the orchard, and the barrel, and the fox. The dawn seeps slowly into the sky, not with the sudden blaze of a spotlight, but like a whispered secret shared between the clouds and the earth. You lie awake in the quiet chamber of your host, the Baron's castle still holding the remnants of night in its thick stone walls. Outside, the first birds begin their tentative songs, cautious and soft, as if afraid to wake something sleeping too deeply to be stirred. You think of home, the orchard blooming with brave, stubborn blossoms, the orchard wall you rebuilt, stone by patient stone, the barrel sealed with care and memory, the children asleep beneath blankets too thin for the cold, but wrapped tightly nonetheless, Emile carving her fox, Tom watching silently, breathing easier than before. Here, in this room you do not belong to, but are bound to for a moment, you feel the weight of all that waiting. The quiet battles won by being present, by standing in the slow turning of the world, by showing up. The council awaits today. Another day of endless words, promises made under the gaze of candles and distant lutes. But your mind is already reaching back toward the earth you tend, and the people who look to you not for glory, but for steadiness. You rise, dress with deliberate care, and descend the stairs. The hall is already stirring. Servants exchange hushed greetings. Nobles murmur over cups of wine that shine like liquid rubies. You nod to familiar faces and pass unnoticed, the shadow of duty pressing lightly but persistently on your shoulders. The Baron greets you with a nod. No grand words this time, just a solemn acknowledgement of shared burdens. The council begins anew. The same disputes revisited, the same maps unfurled, the same weary arguments about land, taxes, and honor. You listen, speak when needed, and offer judgments not with the sword but with the patience carved from years of small, quiet victories. By afternoon, your voice is hoarse from negotiation, your back sore from standing, but still the matter waits. The hearth expects you, the orchard, the barn, the children. All of it will continue, regardless of the fate sealed in council chambers. As twilight softens the world outside, you find yourself alone on a balcony overlooking the distant hills. The sky is a canvas of deepening blues and scattered stars, each a pinprick of light in the vastness. You breathe deeply, letting the cool night fill your lungs, steady your heart. This moment is yours, not for battle, not for ceremony, but for remembering. You think of the barrel, finished and strong, holding more than just cider. It holds the essence of endurance. You think of the fox embroidered in bright threads, a symbol stitched with hope and persistence. You think of the children whose laughter is now part of your daily song. And you understand that being a knight is not the thunder of charge or the clashing of steel. It is the quiet keeping of promises, the tending of life's fragile weave, the courage to stay, not just to fight. You close your eyes, and in the soft hush of night, the world seems to sigh with you. The journey is not in the grand gestures, but in each small act of presence. Each stone laid, each fence mended, each child fed, each day returned to. The night stretches long and gentle, wrapping the manor and its guardian in a peaceful embrace. You are tired, you are whole, and as you lay your head down at last, you carry with you the knowledge that the greatest battles are won not with swords, but with steadfast hearts. Now let your breath slow. Feel the weight of the day dissolve. The stars watch silently, and you drift softly, deeply into rest. Tomorrow is waiting, but tonight you are home.